Welcome everyone. Welcome to Haptic Feedback, a podcast about video games and computer technology. I'm your host Joel, and with me is my hosts Al and Jay. Together we make up the Haptic Feedback. In this episode we talk about the Metaverse. What the F is it? The state of VR in 2022. Virtually there? PC games hardware in 2022. Who else has the fastest gaming CPU now? PlayStation multiplayer, live service, PlayStation Productions, and the PS Plus revamp. What's the plan? Steam Deck, is it a catalyst for portable comebacks? And will Jay ever stop talking about Destiny? Without further ado, let's talk tech. Alright guys, welcome to the Haptic Feedback. So I've decided to rename this thing, Let's change it up a little bit for this year. Al, let's start with you. How you been going recently?
Work is killing me, that's all I'm going to say. I'll try not to moan about it too much. and a little break from work through, going back to my family's place for a week, and then that didn't last too long in terms of at least a bit of a reset. Yeah, that's me at the moment.
And Jay, how about yourself? How's it been going?
Yeah, it's been good. I've been playing some other stuff other than Destiny.
Well done.
Which feels nice. Just being obsessively watching fighting game videos on YouTube and researching on gaming fighting sticks as well. So that's been my latest obsession. Otherwise, good. Yeah, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good. Ticking along. Getting my feet under the table in my new job, so I'm enjoying that. It's kind of refreshing being in a company where it feels like you're doing stuff. That's the only thing I can say about that. So I'm enjoying that. Trying to do a little bit more with the podcast and stuff like that, and really not playing a lot of games, but I have started kind of like playing stuff like The Last of Us again, just so I can just kind of aim to finish it off. It's a story-driven game; you kind of want to finish it off, and ultimately, kind of trying to enjoy the improved weather we have in this country. If you know what I mean.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
Certainly feel happier when the sun comes out.
Yeah, it's making me feel a little bit more kind of human, I would say. You know what I mean? Because it feels like we had a really long, drawn-out winter. That's for sure.
Yeah, it does feel like that. Yeah.
A bit of vitamin D goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. Long may that continue, right? Well, anyway, chaps, we've got quite a bit to get into. The gaming news cycle never stops, and we've got some interesting topics to get into. So let's get into the first topic. Okay guys, for this topic, I kind of want to get into the Metaverse. And really I've titled this, WTF is the Metaverse. What the F is it? Yeah? Okay. So before we kick off, what I want to do is just kind of give you some information, set the scene, give some context to this. Okay? So what I did is I looked for a definition of the Metaverse, and I went to that golden source, that Bible of information on the internet.
Twitter.
Wikipedia. And I got a definition, and I'll read it verbatim, and it's basically: a metaverse is a network of 3D virtual worlds focused on social connection. In futurism and science fiction, it is often described as the hypothetical iteration of the internet as a single, universal virtual world that is facilitated by the use of virtual and augmented reality headsets. Basically, it sounds like somebody in the marketing department wrote that. But anyway, moving on from that, how I've heard it coined is Web 3.0. And to some, it might be even 10.0. given that it's so far out there. The phrase was actually coined by a 1992 book called Snow Crush. It's an old term, okay? And I think in modern times, obviously we have seen Ready Player One, but if you think about it, we've seen The Matrix, we've seen obviously Star Trek Next Gen with the holodeck, and we've also seen Tron. All have their kind of versions of what a metaverse could look like. Yeah? So, guys, I mean, let's get into it. But, I mean, thinking about this, you have companies who are making really big bets on the metaverse. To a point where Facebook rebranded themselves to Meta to build this metaverse platform. And I think, Jay, you said it as well. Like, there's a slow or not slow march going towards the metaverse. Got things like games as a service. We got Nvidia's Omniverse, which, if I read out the definition of it, is a easily extensible platform for 3D design collaboration. We have Xbox and PlayStation looking at free-to-play in-game ads and monetization. In one way, I think that's going to feed into what the metaverse could turn into. And is the metaverse already here in the form of Fortnite, MMOs, live service games? So let's get started. Al, I'll start with you. What do you think? I mean, is this just another kind of tech gold rush? Is it the next evolution of the internet?
Yeah. I think we touched upon it at a previous one, right? I guess maybe overlapping with the VRs type stuff, but I think it is another gold rush kind of thing. The metaverse itself, and actually just virtual worlds, really, have been there for a very long time. We did mention PlayStation, Home and other things. And actually, if you look at, I would say the closest one that you've got today is GTA 5. Like that's the one I think is the one that's closest to it. The rest of them, I don't think they're anywhere near, to be honest. And I think things like Facebook doing their renaming, they've probably shot themselves in the foot. And I think it's not quite there. The accessibility just isn't there. Yeah, I think it's a gold rush. And I think the only other comment I think you kind of mentioned Web 3.0, but I think Web 3.0 is more tied to blockchain NFT type stuff, which I'm not convinced is actually the correct move. So I wouldn't coin it Web 3.0.
Well, I would say the whole blockchain NFT probably speaks to the economy of this metaverse.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other two aspects that I've heard described around Web 3.0 is the decentralization of data, so the users have more control over their data, and the original internet also wasn't really designed to deal with finance and money in the way that it should have, and so the crypto and blockchain allows all those things to happen in a much safer way. And I know we're nowhere near that now, but there's so many definitions of a metaverse, aren't there? And in the same way that people take their existing product and say it's AI driven,
Yeah.
and they have the same code and the same models and everything, and just calling it AI. It's kind of what's happening with the metaverse, right? It's currently at a marketing stage, but for me, I think we all agree, it's where we're going to head over the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years, 100 years, where we'll be connected more so than we are with each human. If you think about our phones, right? We're not physically connected, but we are on our phones all the time. So some people argue that we're already part of a pseudo metaverse because we are already connected, right? I think at some point we'll get to where you'll be able to connect to it without a headset. It'd be frictionless,
Yeah.
and you'll be seamlessly going between the real world and another world which is artificial, but you'll be able to do things in the artificial world that you can't do in the real world. And I think that's where all of it will head. And I don't think it will replace the real world, but things such as education and entertainment, I can certainly see it providing things that you just can't do, right, in the real world. So I find it a very exciting place, and I think it also gives, coming back to gaming, I think it gives a North Star for gaming companies and the publishers and the gaming platform owners to stretch their games a little bit more, nudge it forward for the next evolution of game mechanics and gaming engines, everything. I think on the net it's a positive thing, but coming back to what Al said, at the moment it's been abused for the gold rush, which you get with every round of innovation.
Yeah.
So they'll go through that standard boom and bust, and we'll come out of it with the stuff that actually is valuable and will stick. And so I think it's an exciting thing to happen. I just hope it doesn't take 20 years and most of our core lifetime is gone, and we're on our deathbeds, and then everyone's connecting up into the metaverse and living forever.
I mean, part of it is that definition of saying that it has to be augmented reality or virtual reality headsets. That's just not. I don't think that's a requirement, honestly. Like there are plenty of virtual worlds that you don't need that, and if you imagine okay, you could because Fortnite also pens the term metaverse to avoid not being a game. That's what it was trying to do, and if it opened up where people could put their own content in, like an actual open world, allow people to put stuff in. Can you imagine GTA 5, where literally people could put their own content in?
And I have a point that speaks to exactly that. Yeah, and guys, I mean, ultimately, the so-called metaverse and why, and I think more to the point, why are people so interested in it? Why are companies so interested in it? I mean, the reality is it, and it's funny I should use the word reality, I mean, is it really about where they see people spend most of their time for work and leisure? Is it ultimately where the money's going to be?
I think that's the wrong question, because I think we're already doing that. When you're in your spare time, like we are now, looking into a screen, having a Skype call, or playing on the PlayStation or Xbox, I think we're in the metaverse then.
Yeah.
I don't see it being anything different.
Yeah. What's different, what could be different, is the number of people.
I think the immersion level will increase. I think that's the difference, right? So the fact that all of your friends and family and colleagues at work, you can chat to them on whatever comms platform you've got in your workplace, or WhatsApp, or you have access to instant access to all those people. So you're already in direct communication all the time. You might not think it because you're not actually typing to them, but you're always online.
Yeah.
It's just the immersion level is where we increase in intensity.
Yeah.
And I actually heard Elon Musk on a Joe Rogan podcast talk about this fact that we're already connected, and we're kind of we're cyborgs already. When do you go anywhere without your phone?
We're being, I would say, softened up or desensitized for that moment where we make it into this so-called metaverse. Because you're right, we're 100%, we're always connected. I'm connected at work when I'm doing work, and then on my left-hand side, I pick up my phone. You might be looking at Twitter or something like that. You're connected. We've got fridges and kitchen appliances that are connected, your IoTs. There's all sorts of things. And you're probably right, we're closer to this so-called metaverse than we may really understand that we are.
We're already in it.
Yeah.
Elon Musk talks about this world, a high chance of it being a simulation anyway. If you come back to the VR thing, what is the difference between a physical PlayStation VR headset put in your eyes and you're seeing a world, versus the two eyes that you've got on your physical body taking light and you interpreting that information? It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's just your belief in
you believe what is connected to you, and this is real. So it's just a mind shift. And I can imagine a world where the virtual world and real world, people don't have that same distinction. The same level of distinction that we have. It will be just these two worlds exist, and in the real world I have to do these things. in order to keep alive, and then maybe all my work and social life and entertainment and whatever else work gets created, you know, has to be done in that metaverse. I can see that. I can
You could
see
probably work
offices all closing down and everyone's living where they want to. We have far less pollution in the real world, and think everything's being done in the metaverse, isn't it? It's just
Well, the remote working question, yeah, and the way we communicate, yeah, and it's pretty much remote, it's virtual, and it's becoming the norm now. I mean, people are not going back to offices in droves, I would say. People are even now that the pandemic is somewhat lessened, I don't see. I mean, in my own situation, when I'm in the office, there are days where I'm one of two. They're just not doing it. If you know what I mean, it's no longer the norm in their minds, and I think that hastens our journey towards this so-called metaverse. Yeah, whatever form it takes, and God knows, right? If we ever get closer to the final form of the metaverse, all someone needs to do is trigger another pandemic, and we'll all kind of latch onto it, if you know what I mean.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I think ultimately it depends on the services and the purpose of it, right? So don't forget that whilst we are connected to our phones and stuff, we're not necessarily a different person. We're still the same person. We're still doing that same stuff. I think the advantages of a virtual world or a metaverse, it allows you to be a completely different persona, right? And I think, whether they can actually make that work or not, and whether they could make you really go into a completely different role and role playing and stuff. I'm not quite sure that they're necessarily there.
Yeah.
but just on that's just a construct of where we are now. If you live in a certain place or work for a certain company or have a certain hobbies, you create your own persona. And society creates it. It's not a real thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's an argument from there's a work like social styles, right? So even when you go to work, you actually put on a different work style than your even natural style, right? So
Exactly.
there's a lot of that sort of stuff, which is quite interesting when you're trying to glean it out. So
You flick a switch, right? I mean, and you might say, like, right now there's people who have an online presence, and that isn't who they are in the physical world, right? So that's not difficult to believe, not at all.
What's and just bringing it back to the gaming lens, what do you guys think is the short and medium term impacts of metaversing on gaming?
Okay, from that perspective, I think let's bring it back to how we get to the metaverse and maybe what constitutes or contributes to the metaverse. And I personally broke it down into kind of a number of things. Yeah, and in no order of, I would say, importance or priority. But I thought to myself, VR and AR, so virtual reality in augmented reality. And not for every kind of like form of the metaverse. But that might be, let's say, closer to the end state, or the final form, if you like your anime. Yeah, Dragon Ball it away. The internet itself obviously had to be there in order for us to have a metaverse, because that's how we're connected. Yeah, in my view, metaverse is back connection. I was thinking to myself, like, Internet of Things, where the virtual and real life overlaps. Internet of Things, your console is amongst the Internet of Things, isn't it? Your
Should be.
PC is under Internet of Things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
They're learning more about us basically on our console and then our PCs than we could ever understand as well. And then services. And for us, it's about game services. So the Game Passes and the PS Pluses and whatever else. And I think it's all about that. Really, I kind of think the metaverse is going to be about all of that coming together in stages. And when we're not really talking about the service, we're not talking about VR or AR or the internet, or that our consoles basically divulging our deepest, darkest secrets, right? It's just one thing contributing to that whole. Yeah, and I think it will start off with, let's say, game services and live service games. those are the sorts of metaverses, let's say, that people want to plug themselves into right now. You know, we don't really want to plug ourselves into the metaverse for practicalities. We want to do it for escapism, is what I'm thinking.
But that's a current construct, right? But I can imagine where a time when all work is done, or a majority of work done is done in the metaverse because of cost, and there is more powerful tools to do better things faster in the metaverse. Let's just make this up, doing finance.
Yeah,
You can do
totally.
graphical models and you can visualize stuff, and therefore it's a place of creating a source of income, your main source of income. That I can very much see that being happening.
And I give you Nvidia's Omniverse.
I mean, I think the main thing they should really be going after is stuff like the conventions, right? Like E3 or something. If you could actually make a virtual world for that, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
that would be. You could go and you could do the whole thing, whole E3, couldn't you?
You could.
That'd be amazing for marketing, playing games,
yeah,
speaking to developers.
yeah. I think that's got to be maybe a facet of it. But being a bit old-fashioned, I kind of really would miss the whole, the whole. Let's go
Well,
in.
maybe it's both.
Yeah,
maybe you could be there in person as well as the virtual world of the
absolutely.
same exact thing.
absolutely.
But what much of the experience was virtually, really should have a word here, indistinguishable from real life. Because when we think about VR now, we think it in the constraints of what you can do now. That's not going to be the case in 10 years' time, is it?
No, I mean, I don't think so. It's a difficult one. I mean, at the end of the day, right, humans like that interpersonal engagement when it's all said and done. We want to shake somebody's hand, if you know what I mean.
But sorry, I'll try to cut across here. But for example, and I know Elon Musk is working on this. I'm just using this as an example. He overinflates what he can do anyway. But he talks about this neural link product that they're creating, where you're connecting directly into the brain.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to. I'm just extrapolating out. You may not have to actually have a glove that you wear on your physical hand and you feel like you're touching stuff. The sensory things will be sent to the brain, so it will. They can send signals to your brain to make you think it's real, even though it's visually might not look as real as a real. Or it can get to that level of fidelity.
That's the Matrix.
It's all about the immersion, really, because
it is the Matrix, yeah.
Because there's stuff like I was playing World of Warcraft for so many years. I built some really great connections with a lot of people from around the world, kind of in there, and actually in one case we actually did eventually meet in person, which was really quite nice. But I had some great interactions with those guys. I did, days where I didn't go on, I would miss them. I would miss that interaction with them online.
It's interesting. I mean, right now, obviously, the initial metaverse, right, it's just a tool to supplement, I think, real life. But to Jay's point, at one point, in time, if we could replicate how we feel, then all bets are off, right?
But let's say you're born now, and by the time you get to your teens, things are being done in such a way it's mostly on the metaverse, and then you get into your 20s, you're not going to be used to the same level of physical interaction
absolutely.
that the previous generation are. So it's not going to be it's almost like a barrier we've created in our generation.
Absolutely. Well, think about it this way, right? For me, when I started out, the internet was new. Google was new. Now my nieces, in their generation, they've got their own YouTube channel. They tweet. Yeah. They Twitch. It's all sorts of things. That's so normal. It's normal. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I'm looking at them for, how's this normal? Yeah. But it's normal. And then the next generation, who knows what they're going to get up to? If VR, AR becomes more of a normal thing and it's accessible and the barrier entry is low, yeah, who knows?
I think I think kids will go to school and it's all in the metaverse.
Potentially, yeah.
But then by the time they come out, it's the jobs are in the metaverse. Then
Yeah,
what?
and I can see, like you say, Jay. I think I can see jobs literally in the metaverse, right? Even in virtual worlds as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I mean, like, I'm not really sure I want that basically universe to exist.
No.
But,
So there's a distinction between what we want
Yeah.
and what the next
What's gonna
generation
happen.
want,
Absolutely.
and what's. But I think there is a baseline where our bodies, our genes have been constructed to live in the real world, and if certain things aren't met, our health deteriorates, and that barrier of minimal things that are needed, some exercise, getting real sun, having food, about a real physical social interaction that keeps our body nurtured, that was always going to be a barrier because we're not going to be able to progress to human genetics in order for some of those things to be not impacted by living in a virtual world. And that's been already stretched now by being always online connected,
Correct.
and that limit has already been
Yeah.
tested. So I think that there is a limit to how this will work.
But I kind of think,
For a
yeah,
long time,
we're going to kind of science fiction territory at the moment, and ultimately that could be the way the human race is kind of headed. But just kind of rewinding it a little bit back now, talking about games, right? Video games, the whole VR, AR, the internet, whatever that is, OITs, consoles and services. I think for me, the metaverse right now should be about transporting us to fantastic worlds or places. Yeah, of course we can communicate and engage, absolutely. But I don't know, as gamers, would we want to communicate and engage in a place that looks like a bloody kind of office?
No.
We don't want that, right? And I think for now, for gamers, I mean, it's just about getting us to that spot. And this is one thing I was thinking about this. Like we talked about PlayStation Home the last podcast. I think Al, you were saying, and we were saying, right? It's a VR ready, offering.
Mm.
True. But God, it was boring.
Oh yeah. Well,
I mean,
the base was there.
yeah,
They just didn't take
the
it to
base
that
was there.
next stage.
Yeah.
What is that next stage? Because this is where as much as I believe in the metaverse, I'm not clear on what the next stage would be to really entice me. And I before you answer that question, right? I strongly believe that gaming is going to be the first kind of, let's say, domain that's really going to drive and shape the metaverse.
I think we're the most amenable to it because we're
exactly.
we're already diving into these virtual worlds, whether it's for VR or something else, and we already bought into the universes that these kind of games give us. So
and also the games companies are producing the most immersive, enticing type of things people want to engage with. So, but even us being gamers and me speaking on my own behalf, right? I still don't know what that next step would be that would really entice me as an individual.
So if you treat PlayStation Home as it was, right, it needed to go to as Joe has kind of put, it needs to be about services. There needs to be a reason for you to be in there. There needs to be content. There needs to be a reason. There's some interesting stuff around. I don't know if you've seen what people do on VR chat, where they just go into rooms and just do random crap. And some of these rooms may be very specific as to what they want to do. But being able to bring people together of those sorts of, in that sort of nature, to talk about certain things, would be quite nice. And then the things that I suggested around E3, additional content where people can get access to it. And then a reason to be there. Why should you spend time there? If you accumulate currency of some sort within that environment, just being in that environment or doing things in that environment or contributing to that environment, and of which you then get rewards on, say, skins, furniture, all that stuff. It gives you a reason to do it. It gives you a reason to spend time in there. but they just didn't get to that point. Everything was microtransactions. You need to pay for this, pay for that. No one wanted to spend time in there because it was just dead. It was just empty.
Yeah, but that's where the problem is going to come, right? Is in order to sustain all of that, it's going to have to generate money straight away, and you're back into that kind of these companies not biting the bullet and really driving the innovation and creating the real value proposition for a gamer, versus taking the shortest route where it doesn't create that great experience just to make a quick buck.
And that's what they're doing, right? Microtransactions were the problem. And actually what they should have been thinking about, and GTA's had the idea for ages, where, you know, you've got billboards. It's literally a virtual world, a normal world with billboards. And to be honest, they could just advertise on the goddamn thing.
I think that's my point here, guys. Right? The metaverse is almost an alternative to our reality. But what's consistent is a human being is still residing in that reality, and we're susceptible to advertising, consumerism, and all of those sorts of things. Okay, so this is why I kind of think the first step into the metaverse will be live service games or otherwise, like the Fortnites of the world, and they're quite far along with that. I mean, Sony and the company who owns Lego, they have each invested $1 billion to be part of that future. And maybe it's about the Unreal Engine, right? But maybe it's about something else. We don't know that. Yeah.
But we're speculating, what could it be, right? For example, right? Let's say we all love Fortnite, obsessed with Fortnite, and we're going to play that for the next 5-10 years, right? The metaverse describes interconnected worlds and being easy transition between across those worlds. Why would you want to play Fortnite connected to other games, or even other games connected by the same publisher? I struggle even to stretch my imagination to see what that.
That's because Fortnite isn't actually really. It's its own little virtual world. That's all it is. It's not a true metaverse.
Yeah.
And they as far as I'm concerned, bastardized the term, trying to avoid being calling themselves a game. And you're right, Jay. Like, if you were to truly talk about a true metaverse, you would have one reason, a persona of some sort, shared content that moves between Fortnite and something else. But they haven't got anything else.
You need your own avatar, like in Player One. You have your own unique avatar that's persistent, that you then have full control of everything, your data, what you look like, how you come across, and you then are the centerpiece of that metaverse, going into different universes within that metaverse.
Yeah.
And I who's going to create that? I think it's always, at the moment, it's at least going to be from we've already got a universe, let's extend it up, sideways, outwards, and try and connect to other ones that we have partnerships with. So I don't think we're going to get the answer, but it's, I just feel like it's
those partnerships. Just, you can think of them as little mini these other these separate metaverses, because that's what people are doing. They're building a separate metaverse at the moment. They're like countries within your your overall metaverse. And really, the people who are going to start building these little mini metaverses first are the people who have got really engaging IP in games, and the people who have got a fan base, because that's how you would draw them in. Yeah, and then you can imagine that once that happens, you kind of, hey, let's go to the Last of Us land, or basically God of War land, or let's go to Halo land, or Forza land. You know what I mean?
And this is the other thing. Like, we talked about there's constraints around food and our bodies need, sun, and so. Where's all the time going to come for just living in all these metaverses? That's the other thing as well.
Well, it's the same with gaming, right? You've got to make a choice.
I don't think it's that different, to be honest. Yeah, from that perspective. and I really think the reason that companies are making these sorts of bets that they are, because they know when it comes down to it, if we as a company need to make money, we need to be where people are spending their time
Yeah.
in order for them to spend their money.
And they need to be rewarded for their time, which is quite key.
Yeah.
Which is why this
Yeah.
whole there's so many games which just abuse your time,
Yeah.
and I think that's where those will actually lose out. The ones that reward you for your time,
Destiny.
a reason for you to be there, they will keep that attention. They will keep them going.
Yeah, I think that's where I can see Sony, Bungie, Lego, and kind of who are the creators of Unreal? Epic,
Epic,
sorry. I can see. It feels like they are trying to create the most sticky.
Well, yeah. Think about it. I mean, you have stuff that's looming large that speaks to kind of having virtual economies. Yeah. Then your future considerations are, we talked about VR services, but people are actually buying virtual land, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually considered buying some as well. I haven't actually bought it yet.
Yeah, what's all that about?
I was gonna say there was another one, right? I mean, PlayStation Home was probably the more successful one, but I think Second Life
Yeah,
was
Second
an
Life.
actual
Life,
that was
yeah.
like really big.
It was
in
pretty
terms
much
of
the
that.
same thing, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think that had a bit more in terms of what you could do, like buying
Yeah.
virtual land and stuff.
Yeah.
So far, there's nothing new,
Mm.
and I've invested in this space as well, right? Loosely invested, right? but one of my main worries, and I've invested money that I'm willing to lose, I should say. In the same way, VR had a bit of a resurgence, and it's kind of still been a little bit static and hasn't grown at the growth that we've expected it to. I feel like this is going to suffer the same, and it's going through a hype now, and it's going to have a slow burn to get to where it is, like a real slow burn.
I think it'll be GTA 6. That'll be the real one.
It's just one of these things that I think we've had to give it a name, if you know what I mean. Right? But the reality is, I just think a lot of these things are quite organic when you look at what's behind it all and the foundations of it all. You know what I mean? And naturally, these things will come together.
Yeah, it's a basket of things that exist that are evolving, or new ideas and things that are still to come that they can put under this wrapper of Metaverse.
Yeah, correct. I mean, even Sony and Microsoft recently, it's been said that they're looking at technology that will give you that in-game advertisement capability for free-to-play games. Yeah, free-to-play or the Metaverse, who knows, right? But they're doing things like that because they need to monetize. Yeah. But I think the real power is going to be when we have these so-called virtual worlds. Who's going to be in charge? Who's going to act as the government? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised they haven't done that earlier, because how many games do you play where there's some fake, what looks like advertising that's been created by a developer, where it could actually just be some real adverts, and maybe they can reduce the cost of the game, or they can maintain the game cost for consumer, because the development cost goes up, and that makes no difference to us, as long as they don't overdo it, and that's the balance, right?
Yeah, it is the balance.
Not overstretching.
I think they already had it.
The boundary.
Back in the day when I was playing stuff like Unreal Tournament and Team Fortress 2, the servers themselves could actually put adverts on the side of buildings. So I just don't understand why no one has really done it and actually pushed it to the advertisers. Just doesn't. I don't know. It just feels like they've just focused on microtransactions and that side of things, rather than necessarily giving them the proper another kind of revenue stream.
Well, they're still learning though, and they're probably still learning what they can get away with also.
True.
Look, before we go too much into that, I mean, we should start wrapping up this conversation. But so I had a few items to say. This is our food for thought and a means of getting us to be, if it's even possible, being more philosophical than we've already been. And I was thinking to myself as I was preparing for this, I thought to myself, if AI and robotics is the human race's attempt at replicating life, then is the Metaverse the human race's attempt at replicating the Earth in reality? And basically, what is the non-financial cost of the Metaverse? And maybe it's not a question we can answer now because I'm pretty sure that'd be a whole other kind of podcast. Yeah. And then closer to home and thinking about, let's say, Sony's dreams, like that kind of like game creator, is that actually a kind of VR product? Because the first time I'd seen it, it was basically somebody in VR using the Move controllers, I think, sculpting content in it. And is it the Minecraft to the VR space? In which case, are you then playing God? All right. And how will creation tools that we spoke on earlier fit into this metaverse? If you know what I mean.
That game is really interesting because Sony allowed that game to drift so far from where it originally was, and that they continue to invest in it. Why?
That's why I'm asking.
And it actually makes sense in the context of this metaverse. They've already built out the tools.
Correct. And I mean, the first step is right. Let's give our player base something to engage with, and they're almost priming us. And maybe the next step is let's allow our player base to create what they want to engage in, and then it becomes a bit more viral. And it starts expanding. And that's your real getaway. When you have control, or you think you have control of that metaverse, then that is the ultimate piece of escapism.
Have you guys ever played Dreams?
I think I actually had it for a little bit, but I didn't do much with it.
Did you? Yeah. Because there's some people who have actually replicated other games in there, haven't they?
Yeah, they're doing amazing
like
stuff.
Franchise.
Yeah. You go into that strange territory, though, because it's like, I mean, back in the day, things like Warcraft 3, those things where people have crafted their own things, they are massively successful nowadays. Things like Dota that kind of spawned from it. But then the issue becomes copyright, right? Because I think was it in Dreams where they replicated one of the Mario games, right?
Yeah. I'm literally looking at that image now. Eurogamer Sony pulls Super Mario from Dreams.
Yeah.
After Nintendo complained.
Yeah, they complained.
Wow, it's a very powerful tool.
It's an interesting conversation, and who can say what the metaverse will look like going forward. But I'm with kind of Jay on this. I think games and gamers will be,
leading the way.
They will lead the way, and they'll be the first to step into this uncharted territory. And to the degree we're actually quite ready for it. There's a long way to go, but it's kind of it's exciting what they could do with it, if you know what I mean. I don't want another home, but if you could imagine a situation where I could, with my VR headset on, I could step into a virtual world that looks closer to something like, the Avatar. Yeah, something along those lines, something absolutely alien and interesting and kind of like absolutely fantasy driven. That would be amazing. And if you could tack on enough content, enough services that you could do something in that kind of so-called metaverse, that would be an amazing thing.
Why do you think Sony dropped the PlayStation Home then?
There's just no one on it. Again, no content.
No content, yeah.
Yeah, it's just they just didn't have anything going for it. So I think stopping it after a while makes sense.
That's probably just a business decision, really.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think with that all said, it is time to move on to our next topic. Okay, guys, let's get into the next topic. What I want to talk about right now is the state of VR in 2022. Are we virtually there, and is it still growing? So what I'll do now is I'll give you some numbers, and really this is based on forecast numbers from 2021. Yeah, and it's really around gaming revenue. So 2021 VR gaming market size was 1.4 billion US dollars. And it's more if we consider revenue outside of gaming as well. Yeah. The 2021 VR market size was actually overall 4.8 billion US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
The 2021 VR headset unit sales was 6 million. And really what we're seeing forecasted is, let's say from 2019, we're zero point 0.8 billion USD going up to 2.4 billion USD in 2024. In my view, those don't sound like huge numbers. So you might say to yourself, is the metaverse going to drive up some of these numbers, the number of headsets basically kind of sold? Now we know that Sony are going to release PSVR 2 in 2022, end of, or early 2023.
Yeah.
Xbox has not announced any VR product to date. However, Microsoft did purchase Altspace VR in 2017, which sits alongside their HoloLens division. And if you look at the numbers in Q4 2020, based on data from Statista, we're talking about unit sales here. 1 million Oculus Quest 2 sold, 120,000 PSVR units, 60,000 Valve Index units, and 50,000 Oculus Rifts. Not massive, really, you might say. Yeah, not at all.
But I guess timing of the PSVR there, that timing of that sales may not have been at its peak, I don't think. Was 2020 its peak?
Possibly not at its peak, but you might actually say that Oculus Quest being a cheaper unit, low barrier to entry, is the one that's doing quite well.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's only 1/4 as well.
Yeah, it's only 1/4.
That's not the accumulation of headsets.
Yeah, correct.
I don't know how it's going to happen, but it needs like an iPhone boxed with a headset adapter you plug into the phone for it just to get I'm making it up, but you know what I mean. It needs to come in the box for it to drive the next level of adoption.
Yeah, it's the barrier to entry, and like money talks.
And I guess those forecasts that you've got there, especially for the forward years, don't take into consideration what's happening now in the world, right? With inflation, the war on Russia, Ukraine, that sort of stuff. So
yeah, possibly not.
I suspect those numbers are way too high. I think, especially for 22, I think the cost of living impact is going to drive a lot of people away from it. And I guess also PSVR 2 just isn't ready.
Yeah, and VR is considered more of a luxury item when it's all said and done, even for people who are kind of hardcore gamers.
Yeah.
But what I thought I'd do next is basically just do a side-by-side comparison of some of the, let's say, more well-known headsets, VR headsets, right? So we've got PSVR 2 has not yet come out, PSVR, Oculus Quest 2, Valve Index, HTC Vive Pro 2, and HTC Cosmos. And all I was trying to show, and obviously people who are listening to us won't see the diagram, but I'm going to post this on the kind of like blog site, right? Because God knows it took me a long time to pull it together. Because it's going somewhere. I can tell you that.
This is like you're going for a job interview.
Yeah, it really is, right?
To present.
But if you look at the specs of PSVR, and guys, I'll show you the prices for some of the other headsets in a minute. Yeah, right. It is extremely competitive. And what I'll call out is there are certain things I'll call out right now. Inside out tracking. There's only 2 other headsets who have this kind of feature. One of them, Oculus Quest 2, being absolutely something where the compute unit is part of the headset anyway. Eye tracking, I think it's the only thing on the market that I think has that. It's the only thing that's going to have HDR unless something obviously new comes out. Resolution is actually comparable with, and basically I feel better than everything but the HTC Vive Pro 2, which is a really high-end, headset. And everything else that it has is fairly feature complete, apart from having no headphones. Yeah? Apart from having no headphones. So to me, that's impressive. So
you haven't seen the price yet.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So let's get to the prices. So before we get to the prices, what I did also is that I kind of drew up a comparison on the controllers, and obviously we don't know a lot about the PSVR 2 controllers, but we know obviously everything's wireless these days in terms of controller. It clearly has an analog stick, which the PSVR didn't really have
Hmm.
or didn't really use. Okay, it has finger tracking, but I don't think it's not a full implementation. Okay, whereas something like the Valve Index, it's probably furthest ahead. It's meant to have 87 sensors on the controller to manage that. Yeah, Oculus Quest has kind of like straightforward hand kind of tracking. Obviously, PSVR 2's controls haptics, adaptive triggers. Battery life, I'm not really sure on, but you could believe it's probably comparable in that it'll kind of deliver you 10 hours. And it's a variation of the other controllers between as low as 2 hours to 10 hours.
Well, can't it power itself over the USB Type C?
Yeah, I think that's what the USB will do for it, but the controllers probably will need recharging.
Oh,
Yeah.
controllers. Sorry.
So
Yep.
this is
Sorry. Yep. Yep.
now we get to the pricing side of things. And looking at it, PSVR 2, obviously we don't know, but based on history, you can imagine that coming in at £500. Yeah, similar to what a PS5 costs. I can imagine that. When PSVR came out, it was £349 just for the headset. Current day, it's £299 for the headset, plus camera, plus games. I think they bundle about 5 or 6 games with it.
Hmm.
Even now.
Yeah, even now. But back in the day, it was £349 for the headset, but you need really the camera, which is I think was about £40 to £50.
You don't need the camera anymore, do you? So
No camera, and you'd need the Move controllers if you wanted some of that, and those are about I don't know, anything up to £100, as well as having a console to plug it into. So arguably not cheap. Now Oculus Quest, there are two SKUs, 299 with 128 gigabytes of storage, 399 with 256. They come with controllers. Valve Index, fairly high end. It's the full set is £919. I've seen on the Valve store itself, and that comes with the controllers, the headset, and these base stations, which basically allow you to have that full room VR. So it's motion detectors that allow you to have that full room VR. Outside of that, 689 with the headset and controllers, or 459 just with the headset itself. HTC Vive Pro 2, it's the most expensive one out of the lot. £1,299 for the full thing, and that's headset, controllers, and the base station, which monitor your movement. And £719 just for the headset. HTC Cosmos, £899 for the full set. Plus they've got their own base stations for the movement. £499 with the headset. Is that right? 400. I believe it is. I think there's controllers there. I think headset and controllers, and 449 with just the headset. So really, VR ain't cheap. Yeah.
Well, and the fact that the PC ones, well, with the exception of the Oculus Quest 2, you need a very capable VR machine. And my
Correct.
God, during that time when the graphics cards were expensive, and
Forget
they're
about it.
slowly coming down now, but you wouldn't be able to get something for you'd probably need what, $1,500 maybe
Yeah.
to get something that's capable.
Yeah. And just a note on this, the HTC Cosmos is heavily discounted. I think they discounted each SKU by almost £200. As of April. And there are other headsets as well, like HP's Reverb 2, and there are actually different standards in game stores for VR content. So you might say it's at the moment it's a very kind of variable landscape we're looking at, and it's bloody expensive. Yeah, you can see that the low end in terms of just price, not performance, Oculus Quest 2. You can see why that's sold the way it has. the high end is everything on, on the PC side, from the Valve Index, HTC's Vive and HTC Cosmos, and then it seems like PSVR 2 is gonna occupy the middle ground, from what I can see. So, what price is the future? Well, I guess we got to know, how much the PSVR 2 is going to cost. No one knows. Yeah, PSVR 2 is not likely to be PSVR compatible. But why? And I think last podcast we talked about this. Yeah, and I tried to kind of articulate it a bit better because, like, obviously, we thought long and hard about it. We couldn't come out with kind of a credible reason, right? But this is what I thought. We know that the headset, the Move controllers need calibration. But I was thinking, is this part of the system firmware, or is it something in-game that needs to be patched for every game? And then, second point, how will I/O from the headset camera controllers and the breakout box be emulated? And the other thing I put down here is, like, with that hardware being as limited as it was, the games are definitely designed around some of those limitations. Like, there's latency in terms of the tracking, for instance.
Yeah, I mean,
That
I think
could
when
create problems.
when we covered it, I still think it's possible, but it ultimately depends on the game engine and the coordinates and other things that they've developed into it. If the game engine needs to work out other things that the PSVR headset was providing, then it's going to be difficult. If it was literally purely based on a game environment with 3D coordinates, then you should, in theory, be able to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm too far removed to know what they're doing there.
Yeah. I just think because it's such a Frankenstein solution, right? I don't think it's going to be necessarily as straightforward as we'd like, Now, to the point on, and I think this is the most interesting point for me, right, was that looking at those numbers and the comparisons, I said, PSVR 2 for PC, why not? To me, right, there's a definite gap in the market for this. Sony have probably invested a ton of money in developing what, as far as I can see anyway, a very, very high-end, well, as high-end for now, competitive headset. Yeah?
It has to be for PC.
It has to
as
be,
well.
right? You would have thought.
Yeah, and I think with the USB-C, it makes it much more accessible. You would hope that they've made it work.
Yeah.
And they'll sell far more units, and they'll bring the price down. It's part of their PC's massive part of their strategy going forward, isn't it? So it has to be. There's no way.
I mean, you could actually hack the PSVR original one to work on a PC. It was quite difficult, but you could do it.
Yeah, definitely.
People will lap it up, don't they? Because people like to own a PC and a PlayStation because PlayStation's got the games you can't get in the PC. So it's a no-brainer, isn't it? It's just
but I mean, there does look to be a bit of a gap in the market here. Those are the very capable high-end PC VR headsets. You think about it, it's they're high-end, but on paper they look very comparable. And if Sony can offer a headset plus controllers that are about £500, then that's the middle tier of the market, basically won, if you know what I mean.
It's the gateway drug over to the PlayStation console.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably. I've still held off getting a VR headset for the PC, probably waiting on what Sony's doing with it. So yeah, if it does work, I think I would.
And it makes even more sense as the PlayStation's on x86 and kind of Radeon, graphics now.
It's got to a point that me and Joe are going to have a whip round. I'm just going to buy you a PS5.
Well, I was going to say,
as we said, waving the going.
I had an opportunity to buy a bundle because there's a few bundles that were being available on Game and Currys, I think. So I've had the window of opportunity. I could see it. I could add it to my basket. I could check it out and everything, but I just didn't execute.
Yeah, we're still going to have a whip around. No matter what you're saying, I think it's necessary now. It's got to the point where we need intervention here.
Citizens arrest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's round it off, guys. Let's round it off. Those are my thoughts on this, but I was also thinking, what about Nintendo and Xbox? So I kind of thought back to the history, especially with Nintendo, when they, guys, if you remember the VR Boy, or whatever it was called, that weird apparatus that kind of works kind of like a little bit of like a Tomitronic. You steer through and I kind of wondered, given who Nintendo are, and given what they do, why wouldn't they basically produce some sort of Oculus Quest competitor?
I don't know. It feels like they're too far behind, or at least, I mean, maybe they are working on it, but it just feels like it's too much of a leap.
Yeah, and for Xbox, we've not really heard about what they're gonna do with AR VR, if anything. They certainly they bought a company who specializes in VR, so they've got something.
I would assume that they would have to push it. And
I think they're not going to touch it
really,
because I think they've got enough on their plate
With Game Pass,
with all the game
yeah.
studios getting Game Pass going. I personally think they will allow it on the business side, push that front, and then they'll reuse stuff if it moves forward on that side, and they'll wait and see whether Sony is successful in their second iteration. Otherwise, I think they've got too much on their plate. I'm not saying that they probably have a skunk work team doing something, but I just think they've been burnt so many times. They need to get themselves back on track this generation.
Or they just
adding VR to the mix is not going to.
or they just give it up and work on the actual the actual the metaverse portion of it, the virtual world portion of it, right? You'd expect them to do something, especially Microsoft and their Office Teams kind of stuff, right? You'd hope that they would do that, and it would have synergies with the sort of gaming kind of side of things, and you would hope that it would bridge those two things together.
Well, maybe it's more of a kind of Microsoft, corporation thing rather than an Xbox box thing. Right now, I mean that seems to be, sensible. With the amount of investment that Game Pass needs, it's probably like you can't fight, wars on two fronts sort of scenario, which would make sense to me. But the last thought I had about the whole VR thing was, especially with Epic and them really investing $1 billion in that, 1 billion, yeah. Could we see kind of Sony partnering with Epic for the PC ecosystem? And there's a couple of things here. I think we know Epic as well want to be part of this whole metaverse, gold rush. And arguably, they've got something like Fortnite that would translate quite well. They've also got Unreal Engine 5, and I kind of wonder how, well that supports kind of VR developments. But if Epic want to get into, let's say, the metaverse space, at some point, they might need a VR headset. Yeah, they're not a hardware company; they're a software company. So that, to me, seems to be potentially something that could work.
I think their game would be, as you kind of put there, the Unreal Engine 5. I think it would be crazy if they didn't have some extension or something that allows it to be compatible in some way, even with just the 3D world generation portion of it, right? You'd expect them to be able to reuse that. As for the VR headsets, they're just, I think, again, because they're not a hardware company, I just can't see them doing that. They'd probably partner with someone, maybe.
Yeah, Sony.
And just, literally just hook it into whether it's PlayStation itself or PC, where they're more traditionally kind of based on Unreal 5.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems a little bit more obvious. I mean, like, given, Sony just plowed that $1 billion into that company, they've got a VR headset that's coming out, which you could arguably say should work with a PC without too much problems. It just seems to be like a synergy, if you want to call it, that could totally work. Guys, that's pretty much my thoughts on VR at the moment. I just think there's more to this kind of like VR space than meets the eye, especially with PlayStation. Really, I would not see any reason why they wouldn't basically jump onto the PC space. Because looking at this, there's a clear gap here. You got the low end's been taken care of via Oculus Quest. You're not really gonna compete with that. The barrier to entry in terms of cost is way too low. The high end, the high end's the high end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And looking at the numbers of of unit sales, you can see that really it's a luxury item. But the middle tier and the possibility of really becoming a standard in that space, that I've got to say that's got to be too enticing
Yeah.
for surely even Sony to ignore. You know
Yeah,
what I
because
mean?
then they wouldn't even be tied to the number of PS5 sales, and
Exactly.
that PC market would be quite huge.
Yeah. You wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't have a dependency on how many PlayStations you've sold.
Mm.
There wouldn't be a problem. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I just if they don't do this, I don't know. You know what I mean, I've got to say.
There's
Yeah.
hope. There's hope out there, I think.
Yeah. You don't do it. I don't know. We are in the land of the mad. You know what I mean? Definitely.
What would be the downside if they did do that? Open up to
Well, if you're a fanboy, the whole world is collapsing in on you. I mean, like,
these companies don't.
yeah.
Fanboys don't.
I would say the
dictate anything
downside
else.
is the testing, because PC format is just so wide. The support that they would need to make that work is going to be very different, right, from just testing it and proving that it works on the PS5. So
But
they're
they've
going to have
really
to open it up
already
very.
embarked on that journey with the games they're porting. I just think they've already set sail on that.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think there isn't much of a downside in terms of it's the risk reward thing as well, isn't it? I just think that if you're going to invest this much into a headset that looks arguably extremely impressive compared to the high and low end, I don't know why you wouldn't. I just don't know. Unless the implementation of this headset is so shabby and it's being, it's cut so many corners that really it doesn't matter. But I don't get the sense that's happened, and there's a clear gap here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely an opportunity.
Yeah, Jay, to answer your question, doesn't look like there's any kind of downside, unless you're a fanboy, alright, who just wants PlayStation to remain an island. I think there's no reason. There's no reason. I mean, the Metaverse, Sony, they need numbers. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay,
agree.
guys, I think with that said, it's time to move on to the next topic. So, guys, the next topic I want to talk about and get into is PC gaming hardware in 2022. Now, we're going to see a lot of change coming up. AMD, Intel, Nvidia, they've got some big products that are going to come out in the second half of the year. Okay?
Yeah,
And potentially, we're going to see another generational leap in the PC space, in the PC gaming space. Okay? So, as of now, and again, let's start with AMD. Let's start with AMD. And now, AMD are claiming we have the fastest gaming CPU, as they always do. Yeah, right. Yeah, and what they've done, they've released this thing called the 5800X 3D. And what this thing is the first consumer CPU with 3D V-cache technology. Yeah, 3D V-cache technology. Their Epic chip is the first V-cache chip for the data center. Okay, so that's how they've played it. Now, I think Jay, you on one of the topics you had asked, what's the next big thing, and like we talked more about maybe a 5 to 10 year horizon.
Yes.
Yeah, but the next big thing really in the immediate future is for these chip designers and manufacturers to basically do a bit more with the packaging technology. And when I mean packaging technology, I mean 3D cache technology, so stacking, if you like.
Yep.
They're stacking the components of the chips, yeah, simply put. And what MCM, where they're having kind of like multiple chips linked together, yeah, or tiles, if you like, or chiplets. Yeah.
You've seen that with the M1 and Max and the latest version of
Ultra.
the Ultra, where
Yeah.
they've actually put the chips together, haven't they, with no lag, fully
Yeah,
integrated.
it's absolutely that. And you've seen evidence of that in the PC space with stuff like Infinity Cache. You know. Now, getting back to what AMD have done with this X3D chip, we're actually seeing 15% more gaming performance. Yeah, but the primary benefits are, I'd say, 1080p res, which is the majority of gamers in the PC space. Okay, they're running at lower clock speeds than the vanilla, uh, 5800X. Okay, which means worse performance for non-gaming workloads. Yeah, for the X3D. It's really just geared towards gaming and gaming workloads. Yeah. What I also hear is that overclocking is quite limited on the X3D chip. Could be because of kind of the way the kind of cache is stacked. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's quite a pattern I think nowadays anyway, Joe, with the way we're seeing the chips. I mean, the chips already come, pre kind of tuned already, so there's very little
Yeah.
gains to it, and yeah, I can understand why.
Yeah. There's no headroom for overclocking anymore, is there? I mean, you get your chip at, kind of as is. This is the performance out of the box. But I guess the question I have about this new chip, fastest gaming CPU or not, is it worth it? Seriously, is it worth it?
15% boost. It's like
Well, it's cost performance ratio. That's always key for me.
Yeah, it is a cost performance ratio. Now, the 15% increase, I just let's be clear on that. It does vary from game to game. There's no doubt about that. And the levels of gaming performance it's being compared to is the top end Alder Lake CPU, which I think was approximately £700, or to £749 MSRP at the time. So obviously, compared to what this particular chip costs, quite a gap. Yeah. But the things to keep in mind, is it worth your 15%? Again, yeah. Is it worth that? The other thing to consider is really, if you're there to build a completely new system, which means new CPU, new motherboard, yeah, then I guess there's less of an advantage of going down this route. If, however, you're not going to upgrade your motherboard, you just want to like an in-place upgrade, where you can just drop in the chip and get that performance boost, and you only care about gaming performance, then it's a little bit more desirable. Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more desirable.
Joe, does that mean it's the same socket as we've got today?
Correct.
Alright.
AM4. AM4.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And being a bit cynical, all right. I think I heard conversations that the reason we've got the 5800X3D is because, and again, this thing clocks, lower, clock speed's lower, yeah. Usually when it happened, it's because the quality of the silicon wasn't as good, and therefore the version of the chip maybe didn't pass kind of like the quality assurance or the quality control. So being cynical, are we getting these chips because we got a batch of chips, 5800Xs that didn't pass quality control, where AMD have just decided, just slap on a bit of cash on it and then sell it for more money, Now the other side of things is obviously heat generation, and which is like it can clock higher, but they won't do it because of the heat generation aspect of it. And I think great for AMD, they've got something that's good for marketing. Whether it's, I mean, I'm certainly a bit lukewarm on it. Lukewarm because it's got a very specific use case. Yeah, very specific. Okay, and it's not cheap. Not at all. I think it could have done with being about, I don't know, £30 cheaper than it is. £30 to £50 cheaper than it is. Yeah, that would have really put the kind of like cat amongst the pigeons.
Yeah.
But the level of cache it has is, it's undeniable. You're talking about three times the amount of cache, of the, basic compared to the original chip. Yeah. But I think the interesting part of this is, I mean, everybody's been talking about also pro consoles. PlayStation 5 Pro, Xbox Series X2, or whatever they want to call it, right? But this is a route into that. So you could effectively run the same CPU, yeah? Considering that the consoles, their CPUs don't typically clock that high anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And the upgrade is put a bit of cache on it. And as far as they're concerned, those consoles, the only use case they deal with is games.
Yeah.
So you got a bit of, you got a route in to upgrade your CPU without changing the architecture and without kind of like having to worry about core count, clock speed.
Yeah, but it does mean another form factor to test against, though. So I don't know if they'll do that, especially for something that still feels first version experimental to an extent.
I don't think it's that experimental, Al, because they've got Epic in the data centers already.
So is there anything relating to the kind of Unreal Engine 5 stuff that these chips will take advantage of?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think that specifically for this. I don't think so. But I understand that Unreal Engine is quite CPU heavy anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So, depending on what Unreal Engine's doing, and I don't know, having this level of cache might be useful.
So it's amazing how much more efficiency you can get out from the layers of code versus just having raw power in the CPU.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having a large amount of cache, that's as kind of like plug and play as you can get, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You're not accounting for clock speed, so you don't necessarily have to worry about kind of like timings. You're not accounting for, let's say, core count. So, you're not worrying having to distribute workload over a great number of cores, any of that sort of thing. It's a pure latency play. Because really, what you're saying here, right? Instead of getting what I need from memory, I'm going to kind of like on-die cache, which is lower latency. What you're getting at this is basically frames.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really what you're getting in the.
But I assume that this is the bottleneck and not the GPU, right?
Correct. I mean, this is why it kind of seems through testing it seems to function quite well with 1080p. Yeah. I mean, the reality is if you're running something at 4K, the GPU is always going to be your bottleneck, not the CPU. But then again, in certain circumstances, you need some kind of like CPU power. It's just, I guess, having a game running in a little bit more stable, with fewer blips and hiccups and that sort of thing is what you're getting.
When's this chip due?
It's out.
Oh, is it? All right.
It's out right now.
Okay. So the 15% isn't an AMD 15%. It's an actual. It's the one's already tested it.
Yeah, the 15% is an AMD marketing 15%.
Oh right. Okay.
But,
So we might
yeah,
less
but
than that
no. The testing's been quite. The testing has held. Has held it up somewhat, validated to that somewhat. Obviously, not for every game, and sometimes it's more than the 15% actually. But it's pretty much it's pretty much accurate, and I think AMD are usually quite accurate with their marketing numbers.
Yeah.
Though they're equally quite selective.
Right.
Yeah. Though I'm a bit lukewarm about the chip itself. I just think you could have done with a little bit more. Would have been nice to see like higher end SKUs from the current generation of Ryzen chips having that cache as well. But then you've got conversations around about cost. Then you've got conversations about, well, the new Zen chips are coming out late this year. Is it worth it for us? Yeah. Then other considerations are ultimately I feel that this V-cache technology is quite expensive. So it may not scale in terms of cost the way we anticipate it might be for higher core count chips. There's all sorts of reason I guess not to do it. But I mean I think the biggest one is that look, our new generation is chips coming out at the end of the year. Why do it? We'll give people a stopgap measure for the mobiles on the market right now and the socket on the market right now, and we'll try and retain the gaming crown at close to, let's say, 60 to 70% the cost of our competition, and try and cast some shade over them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this will work. That would work if you're just gonna stick to your current day AMD motherboard.
Yep.
If you're looking to build a new system, then personally I wouldn't even look at this.
Yeah.
But nice try, AMD. So AMD, we have the fastest gaming CPU. What we should talk about next is really Intel. Yeah. So Intel, we also have the fastest gaming CPU. Right? And I think at around about the same time, what Intel did was they released the i9 12900KS. Yeah, and it's the first consumer CPU running with a 5.5 gigahertz clock speed. Yeah, 5.5 gigahertz. And I think that's two cores out of the 8 big cores. Yeah, so that's quite significant. Yeah, that is quite significant. Now, the downside of that is that it's actually just a 5% boost versus the vanilla 12900K. 5%.
Could you possibly get worse performance for games because they're not actually geared for these new chips? If you're talking 5%, I mean, there's not.
Yeah, I think in this case, because the architecture's pretty much identical
Okay, then you
between
probably will, yeah.
the old and new version, you won't see a tremendous amount of difference, let's say,
Yeah.
game upon game. I think the cache is a little bit different because it's how it is with, how cache usually works. It's kind of like you need a cache hit. So as much as what you're trying to get needs to be in cache, if the cache is basically like emptied of that data you need, then they ain't gonna it's gonna be less efficient. So that's a little bit more, I think, variable.
Yeah.
But I think this would be quite consistent. But it's consistent by giving you a 5% performance boost over the original chip, which is not significant. Yeah. So obviously the question mark is it worth it? Well, it's almost 150 to £200 more expensive than the vanilla chip for a 5% increase. And the vanilla chip is £514 to £570 I've seen it for. The new chip is £749 for your 5%. So basically that's the bleeding edge at the moment if you want, or that's a cutting edge at the moment if you want that. Yeah. And for completeness, I left the kind of rising, in my comparison, I kind of also looked at the kind of rising chips, and again, the 5800X3D is, I think, approximately £418 on the AMD site if you can get it at that price. Yeah. The vanilla, 5800X, 299, and the 12 core 5900X, almost £360. Yeah, that I've seen it for. So these are the price comparables really. So is it worth it? Absolutely not. not unless you've got more money than so much money that you can basically burn it. Yeah, not for a 5% increase that you're not really going to notice. If I'm being totally honest, I think it translates to probably between 1 and 3 frames of
it'll be tiny depending on what game.
Yeah, but you can say
Every frame counts.
you know what? Yeah, you can say I've got the fastest gaming CPU out there. But again, it's all comparable. It's all very kind of much about muchness or whatnot. It's it's very much like that. But there you have it. We all have the fastest gaming CPU, you know. Every one of us,
Yeah. In the right circumstances, of course.
in the right circumstances. But I think what we should take note of is also the power. You know, the power consumption of some of these chips. Typically, Intel are really running with a lot more power. I think some of the base TDP isn't really what it's going to be running at under stress. It's going to be significantly more. You know, it's something to kind of look out for. Now, so that's what AMD and Intel have done right now. For Nvidia, well, we talked about the 3090 Ti, yeah, or Ti, depending on, you know, how you want to kind of like call it. I kind of put a lot of shade on this, but you know what? It's actually real. Yeah, this thing's actually real. It's come out, it's on the market, people are able to get it. It's an absolute halo product. Because I've seen it retail for, you know, between £1,870 to 2,500 for a GPU. With the vanilla 3090 coming in at £1,400 to £2,100. Yeah, from what I've seen. What does the Ti or Ti have over the standard 3090? A whopping 10%. That's what. And again, I'll repeat, it's actually real. This isn't some marketing bullshit.
It was the same thing with even the 3090 itself. We all looked at it and were like, what? You
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
so with an even bigger, you know, 3090 Ti, it's like, well, okay, there's not many people that will want it. So, but
Yeah.
seems crazy.
Absolutely.
But you know.
What is the point of them making these? It's just
That's a good point, actually. I think the only point can be is just marketing kind of points, and the fact that there are some people out there who are kind of very wealthy gamers, if you like, who just want the best of the best.
Yeah,
That's
if they've got
reality.
enough money, they'll just splurge on it. But it's not
But if
really performance value minded in any way, right?
No, it's not. It's not having, let's say, you know, it's not about delivering a product that everybody can buy, nor is it about the price performance ratio, or is it kind of delivering anything that's even sensible.
I mean, I meant it from a more of the manufacturer perspective because you know parts are already constrained, production lines are already hampered. So
they're selling these at a premium as well. They know they're not. They know again. You know the way that Joe's kind of covered off the performance. You're paying an extreme premium just for this, and they know they're going to sell a lot less than their mainstream kind of lower versions. So I'm sure they've done this deliberately, as Joe put it, a Halo kind of product. Hey, you have got the fastest GPU, you have got the fastest chip, kind of product.
Yeah, and not only you have, we have. Don't forget that part. Yeah. But to give you know, like Nvidia an additional kind of like you know, like feather in their cap, they've also got the most power hungry GPU because this thing comes in at, you know, a 450 watt TDP. You know, so much for going green, hey. But fair enough, Nvidia. You don't have the fastest gaming CPU, but you do have the fastest GPU. Again. Alright, let's move on. So, what can we expect from AMD in the second half of the year? So this is where it gets interesting. So second half, and more likely late Q3, Q4, we're going to get Zen 4, Ryzen 7000. They've skipped a whole 1000 on desktop. Basically, that was kind of reserved for laptop. Yeah. But what they're doing now is like they're moving on to a 5nm process node, which more or less means more speed, less power, and in this case 1.8 times the transistor density over 7nm, which is what they currently use. Yeah. Now, AMD have also said they're able to run a version of the chip at 5 gigahertz all cores. And I've heard this thing may go up to 5.2 gigahertz. And again, speculation rumor. Some of this is actually concrete because AMD have already kind of like announced it. It does support DDR5, PCI 5, USB 4, but I've also heard that it may be DDR5 only, which means more expense. New socket and therefore new mobiles, new motherboards, because they're basically bringing in AM5, and this will be the first chip that slots into that. Vcache, I thought was odds on, but now I'm going to have to put a question mark on it. One of the ways I'm thinking about it is that I wouldn't be surprised if AMD, when the time is right, offer a gaming model of their chips. If you know what I mean. This is the gaming edition with Vcache.
Well, they've already done it with
Yeah.
with the previous one, right? It'd only be obvious that they would do that same pattern.
Yeah, correct. So, possible. Also, we're not really sure on whether it will have more cores. I mean, I've heard it all kind of basically plateau at 16 cores. 24 cores a possibility. I think they could do it, but it just depends on how much heat they feel from Intel's, competing chips.
Yeah.
If they don't feel that much heat, they won't do it, obviously. And again, whether this thing will have integrated graphics in the form of RDNA 2, possible. Yeah. And to be honest, right now, AMD actually are leading integrated graphics. Yeah, no doubt about that. So what can we actually expect from this? Well, they're saying 40% overall performance improvement versus Zen 3. And that translates to, I think, single and multi-threaded, and
Is that pure compute performance, or is that also heat performance, heat power consumption?
It's pure performance.
Okay.
No one really knows about the kind of like
Efficiency.
energy efficiency or anything like that. Yeah. But they're saying 25% improvement in single core performance. But again, nothing's really confirmed. But the fact that it's going to be running at 5 gigahertz, and that is more or less confirmed because Lisa Su was on, I think, was she on stage? And she basically actually called that out, all cores. And that's quite impressive for AMD because traditionally they've always lagged behind Intel in terms of kind of clock speed, and that's one of the kind of factors in terms of performance. So obviously a lot happening in AMD camp. Intel, what they're doing second half of the year, Raptor Lake. So again, the next version of their CPU range, a step up from Alder Lake, still using these big little cores. They're talking about new hybrid CPU core changes for improved performance. What that means, no idea. But they're talking about new Raptor Cove P cores, so obviously enhanced kind of power cores, I want to call them, but the same E cores, so the same Gracemont cores, the little cores, yeah. Improved cache for gaming. What is that? Not sure. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be like a big cache, effectively. More cache. That's how it sounds to me. But obviously they're supporting DDR5, PCI 5, Thunderbolt 4. And I think the Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 standard is coming together. Yeah. They're using the same kind of socket. So the LGA 1700. So that means obviously you could probably drop it into the same kind of motherboards. And also using the same Intel 7 node process, which was being bandied around as Intel's 10nm process. Yeah. So I don't know if you would call this Intel 7 Plus or something like that, to give it some respect. Okay. And people are speculating that this might come in terms of clock speed with 200 to 300 megahertz more clock speed. So you might be looking at a top kind of clock speed of 5.7 to 5.8 gigahertz. That's what we're looking at. And more cores, potentially 24. But again, nothing confirmed. All rumors.
And I'm assuming no changes in the nanometer transistor kind of sizes and shape.
For Raptor Lake, potentially. I mean, speculation that they're on Intel 7 Plus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's a make-believe name, but but it's not quite. I don't think that's like going from let's say a 7nm process to a 5nm
Okay.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's going to be some improvements to it, but it's not quite that. Now, moving on to graphics. So AMD RDNA 3 again, second half of this year, second half of 2022. This is where we talked about a little bit about the packaging. So they're using this multi-chip module design. They're moving away from CUs, compute units, to work group processors, and that's a change in their kind of their architecture and the way they're organizing, the compute units and the componentry of the actual GPUs. The top end SKU, Navi 31, is claimed to have 3 times the number of stream processors versus the current high end. Their current version of the 3090, the 6900 XT. Clock speeds going from 2.5 gigahertz to 3 gigahertz. And this is an interesting series of numbers. I mean, there have been certain leaks, or so-called leaks and rumors that have said Navi 31, the top end SKU, weighs in with 76.8 T-flops. And again, T-flops aren't the be and end all of GPU performance. Yeah. Then Navi 32, 57.3 T-flops. That's your mid-range card.
Crazy numbers.
Navi, yeah, I know. Navi 33, 24.6 T-flops. And the RX 6900 XT, their current top end, 23 T-flops.
We're getting. I mean, those sort of numbers. You get such, and when the games are actually built for them, you get such high fidelity that what are you going to do with the extra teraflops? You're going to have to go to 8K.
And would it be even worth it? Would it be even worth it?
It's not. It's
thought.
no. I mean, the power that you need will go up exponentially, won't it? The more.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how they leverage it, and again, you don't know how much kind of ray tracing and the like play into this.
Yeah, that'll eat up a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, or whether they can offload some AI onto these cards and how that factors in. And I remember for a time, I think starting from the PS4 generation, they were using this thing called asynchronous compute, which meant that if your graphics card or GPU wasn't leveraging that compute, right, the PS4 and some specific AMD graphics cards were able to leverage the kind of like haircut, if you like, the spare compute for other things like AI and stuff like that. So there's like potential for that, I think. Don't know, but it's impressive numbers. And again, this is all kind of rumor and so-called leaks and stuff like that. But I've seen this multiple times. Like, so you kind of have to wonder, is this real? The clock speeds, again, that's not far-fetched. The AMD kind of GPUs really run at high clocks. I mean, I think even the PS4 is 2.2 gigahertz. And current day there are some custom AMD GPUs running at 2.6 gigahertz. All real. Power, however, at the top end, we're talking 375. That's 450 watts. Yeah, it's getting expensive in more than one way actually. Now, moving on to Nvidia, they've got this thing called Lovelace, code name for it, the RTX 4000 series. So again, late 2022. I think we're talking about TSMC's 4nm process, and that's maybe there's some rumors. Now the top end SKU is going to have 144 streaming multiprocessors. Yeah, these the RTX 3090, which has 82. So it's not quite double, but it's kind of going in that direction, and that's reflected in the amount of CUDA cores, 18,000 versus approximately 10,000. They're clocking up to 1.6 gigahertz, up to I think 2 gigahertz is the rumor, but the power, the rumors are 600 watts. 600 watts. If you basically say that out aloud, that's a number. That is a number.
But that'll be the top end. What for the 4090 or something?
Right? I don't know. 600 watts for a graphics card. I mean, come on.
You'll need that for the metaverse and all the NFTs as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. But they're talking about GDDR6 plus or GDDR7. So obviously, better, faster memory, or I should say faster memory. And there's been rumors that Nvidia has its own Infinity Cache, which may mean it sticks with GDDR6 for the time being. That's also possible. And last but not least, Intel. So finally, Intel have got obviously a credible range of GPUs in Intel Arc GPUs. I think codename Alchemist. So the ZHPG product. So what are we looking at? So desktop, I think, was touted for Q2 2022. So we've not seen them for desktop yet. I think they've rolled out for laptop. So I can only assume that's been delayed, coming out later. I've not seen that many reviews for the laptop products either, so I'm not really sure what's happened to them. And it's the first dedicated Intel GPU since 1998. 1998. I mean, obviously they're big in integrated graphics because their chips sell so well, but that's really it. They're talking TSMC 6nm process node, and the top end SKU is comparable to an RTX 3070 and RTX 6800. So good for your first attempt, but by the time it comes out, and by the time I think the Q3 hits us, they're already going to be lagging behind. They've actually just got to get something out in the market now.
Yeah.
What's driving this? Again, like jokes aside, the metaverse must be a big part of this, right?
Potentially, also that really Intel want to compete in this market.
Yeah. I mean, go on, Joe.
Yeah. There's also the kind of data center, like play as well. GPUs for the data center are a big thing. You're right. I mean, you're right. If the metaverse, is the next big thing, there's a possibility they need to have a product there.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need GPU power in order to, assuming it's a VR metaverse. You definitely need that sort of stuff. But I think it just stems from the fact that they had a change of leadership. They had a massive shake-up, right? They finally caught up again because on the CPU front, after AMD took them right to the wall on that stuff, and Intel, I think, have managed to catch back now. And they've still got a very good brand name, and I think this is just them opening up, using their expertise and kind of pushing further into another market which has synergies, and it kind of makes sense. So
yeah, I think it does make sense. I would say, look, I think Raja Koduri, who runs the GPU division for Intel, he actually was there before the CEO change. But I would say, look, if you look at the GPU market, I think it's multi-million, multi-billion. So clearly, there's money to be made. It's likely to grow if all of these other kind of things we're talking about, like the metaverse and whatever else become real.
And probably they probably looked at the Bitcoin miner market and they're thinking, man, it could be quite nice to take a little bit of slice of that. So
yeah, who knows, right? I mean, when there's money to be made, it's a business decision, isn't it? At the end of the day. But I think for us, I mean, look, it is really good to have competition.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's the reality of it. It's yeah, I mean this particular generation of Intel products isn't really, unless they surprise everybody, isn't really going to be, in terms of pure specs and performance, comparable to the up and coming generation from AMD and Nvidia. But it's a beginning, and you can only see Intel accelerating.
Yeah, and if they offer it a good value point, it's another one of those that if it can compete on one angle on it, then it will still sell. There was I mean, I guess now though, with supply, because GPU prices are starting to tip back to getting closer back to retail again, because the supply is kind of starting to improve. But if they get it right, they still should be a decent amount of demand for GPUs.
Yeah, absolutely. Let battle commence, as it were, And it'll also be interesting to see, how it plays out in terms of the kind of laptop market as well, where AMD and Intel are going to have both a CPU and a GPU offering. What does this mean for APUs? Yeah, as well, because that's going to be a real market at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think you're right. APUs in particular, especially for as long as it's metaverse capable, I think that'll be the key, right? So if it can support VR to an extent, I think that'll be perfect for it, right?
Mm.
That's probably its main market if it can get that to work.
I mean, let's be honest. Like we've had APUs for a while. They're all sitting in the consoles.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, but the APUs for PCs are the GPU portion of it is usually quite low powered.
Yeah, and their
Yeah.
laptops they've been there for, and that's why I guess Intel have been
Yeah.
doing that for years. Just all
Yeah.
pre-packaged as part of what they've got.
Yeah, but getting out a good APU, it's kind of probably annihilate the budget GPU market. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of cost savings in terms of the laptop technology as well. It's a single chip. You only have to worry about cooling that single chip as well. And again, I don't know what it means from the memory configuration, but you can imagine there's something there as also. I think they're kind of thinking along those lines, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, that's what I'm seeing here. So, guys, the long and short of it is that this year is going to be a really exciting year for PC gaming technology. We're refreshing all of the CPUs.
Mm.
That's happening. The GPU technology is also being refreshed. And the refreshes are not just a refresh, it's a real step up
Mm.
here. It's a generational leap we're seeing here, which is quite interesting. We have Intel entering the market, yeah, in terms of discrete GPUs, and that can only be good for everybody, to be quite honest. What Nvidia do now in terms of, let's say, obviously they're big players in the GPU market. Let's be honest, they're number one for a good reason. But what they do now with a lack of a CPU is going to be quite interesting. And I think their play is the enterprise, really more than consumer. ARM's not happening now, but it doesn't mean they can't get they don't have an ARM license. I think they do have a ARM, license. So it's just interesting to see kind of how those plans play out, because you have to think they have big plans for ARM, and the reasons why they wanted to purchase ARM were for those reasons.
Mm.
So at some point we're going to see a bit more from those guys. I mean, whether ARM's, to be clear, ARM is a big factor in the consumer market, because that architecture is in most of the mobile kind of devices out there. And ARM could be something big in maybe kind of the Linux space, something along those lines. But compared to Windows, that's a tiny that's a tiny space. But Windows has a RISC-based kind of version. So how far is that going to be pushed? And if that gets pushed, right, then Nvidia might have an angle to play, in the consumer space anyway. But I still say it's more about enterprise. Yeah. So interesting times. Yeah, very interesting times. How it translates into better games, I don't know yet. You know what I mean? Right. But in terms of pure technology, it looks pretty kind of like we're in for a bit of a stellar year, I think. And I think, guys, with that said, it's time to move on to the next topic. Okay, guys, the next topic I want to get into is really, Steam Deck.
Mm.
It's out now. But really what I want to get into is it really a catalyst for more portable gaming devices? And will Steam Deck usher in a new era of portable gaming? And I say that really tongue-in-cheek if I'm being honest, yeah. Now, we know Steam Deck has been reasonably successful, but I have really no official sales numbers, at this time.
Mm.
So it's all relative if you ask me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say, again, is it worth it? Who needs it, and is it truly portable? Because when you see that Steam Deck, it ain't no small device. I mean, it looks bigger than the actual Nintendo
You should
Switch.
see it next to a Switch. It's quite funny. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that have it. I
Yeah,
think there was
Yeah, I've
one
not seen
YouTuber
that,
that
yeah.
was saying that they got ridiculed for their Steam Deck in comparison to in comparison to the Switch.
The Switch is, it's not small.
no, that Switch
But
is.
that's
That's
what I
what I
mean.
mean. The
The Steam
Switch
Deck
ain't
is a
small.
monster in comparison.
I haven't seen this actually.
Yeah, it's significantly bigger. I mean, I never considered a kind of Nintendo Switch something that you
Wow.
put in your back of your pocket, right?
Oh
But
my
then you look
God.
at the Steam Deck and you think to yourself, okay, that's not a coffee table device. That is the coffee table.
It's ridiculous because the Switch is quite wide.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's trim. It's trim in comparison, right? Because the Steam Deck is one of those. It's quite chunky. It's quite thick as well. So,
Yeah, I think they've been trying to be quite, like ergonomic with the kind of grips and all of that sort of stuff. So
It does look comfortable to hold.
yeah. So there's no doubt it's a good device. It's just that the definition of portable. It's depends whatever your taste is, right? If one of us is walking around with a man bag, brilliant. It's definitely portable. but if we're not,
I've got someone's put this image of it next to a banana. Banana looks small.
ridiculous, right? Ridiculous.
Wow.
But one of the things I was thinking about really is that, based off this, I mean, obviously, you have to think that Microsoft, Xbox, and Sony and PlayStation, they're watching this with interest, right? And it's a shame that we don't have genuine sales figures, because I'm sure they're watching that with even more interest.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, would this encourage any of these two companies to produce handhelds of their own? Obviously, Nintendo don't need to worry. They've got the handheld market for consoles sewn up. Yeah. Would Xbox and PlayStation consider it?
I'm going to say Xbox. No, Sony. Sony was always a possibility, and I think they've still got a potential, really, if they really wanted to. But it is like, do they want to focus on their platform and pushing, Sony on Windows and using Steam the Steam Deck to kind of surface that, or do they really want to push their own device, which is proprietary PlayStation in some way?
Yeah, I think Sony have always been that way, where they're been more of a they're obviously more of a hardware company.
Yeah,
I mean, that's for sure.
That's why I think they've got an opportunity to do it, but Microsoft I don't think has.
I think they're all done with it, to be honest. I think with COVID, struggling to get consoles out, particularly Sony, who've been stung by having so many different products, I just don't think they'll go there. Microsoft as well, given the fact that with the Xbox, they're more concerned about Game Pass and getting as many platforms. Adding more hardware, I don't think makes sense. Or maybe it does. Maybe it does. I mean, they're coming out with a streaming stick, aren't they? Soon. It's coming out of the year, they're saying.
But that's really just anchored on their service.
Yeah.
I don't think that's nothing. It's about the hardware at all. I think it's just that we want to we want to let you access our service in more ways.
Yeah, I think the thing is, at the moment we're in this really, really strange place where I think we're kind of moving into a post-COVID world, and people are starting to move around again. But with the Russia-Ukraine stuff, that's kind of and recessions looming. Will that trajectory continue where people continue to travel? Will they be wanting to be spending more on these portable things? Not quite sure. Because I think if I look back to myself, the only reason why I don't have a Switch is because I'm not actually traveling. If I was traveling, I probably would have had a Switch a long time ago. And staying with Steam Deck. Steam Deck is an obvious thing that I would love to be using whilst I'm traveling.
I just wonder if these devices, it's more about portability around your kind of abode. You'll flat your house otherwise, rather than like on a train or plane or whatnot.
Sometimes it's just there's a certain sense of freedom just not being tethered to your TV. It's just, sometimes some games they just have a different feeling. So,
well,
I mean, how many people actually play their Switch while traveling? Though that's why I just haven't seen that many people.
Mobile gaming. you addict.
Yeah, I mean, I bought mine in the specific grey colour of my Switch, thinking that I don't want to look like a fool on the train with the bright red and blue. But then, as soon as I stopped using it, I mean, I tried it on the train a few times, right? And as soon as I stopped even wanting to use for that use case, I wish I bought the coloured one. You won't use it on the train. It's more like if you go somewhere, you've just got it with you, or you drive around your car, you parked up somewhere, played a few games, or you take your kids to a class or something. I think it's more for that sort of type of thing.
Did I ever tell you guys I had a colleague a long time back, but he hacked a Switch. He had to put like an extra power unit and batteries and other things onto it, and but he basically hacked it from its mobile format to work on a 1080p screen. So he's traveling with this kind of like Switch inside a box, which then was kind of enhanced so that it could run on a 1080p screen. So he was basically playing. It was almost like a laptop then by that point. It was like a big box with then a 1080p screen, and it being able to run off a battery.
So effectively docked it.
Yeah, he kind of essentially created its own dock to run out 1080p.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Quite a lot of work, but he made it work.
And again, I ask it, was it worth it?
Well, I mean, I guess it worked. It was fine for him for his commute. So he used it on his commute, whenever he was coming into work. So he actually enjoyed it. So
interesting. But going back to, I don't, I'm not sure. I mean, you're right about Xbox. I think they're just too focused on the service. I mean, if anything, it's like if they could guarantee that there'll be millions of subscribers by introducing, a portable Xbox, then they would do it. But I think they know that there's no guarantee of that. And PlayStation, Sony, I think you're right. They're kind of done with it, aren't they? Really.
COVID, I think, has killed a lot of products that were in the pipeline. Because of the manufacturing challenges. So and then some of the windows for when they were going to come out get closed because they already had another product to take over it. So I think there will be a lot of products, and I just can't see them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things had to be reprioritized, right? So, if they were working on something like this, they probably would have thought, no one's traveling, no one's flying. Why would I now? Why not repurpose all my resources to something else?
Exactly. I mean,
yeah, true.
Think about how many next-gen games are out on the new consoles.
Not that many.
Nothing. It's basically nothing.
Yeah, not that many. Not that many at all. I mean, if I'm being honest.
It's unusual for this late in the cycle already, isn't it? We're just.
Surely just a year passed, isn't it?
It's I mean, when the PS5 came out, was it 20?
Oh God, it was quite a long. Well, it was a long time ago.
2019 it came out, didn't it? September 2019.
Yeah, something like that. But
hold on, guys. I don't think it was. It
was pre-COVID though. I thought. And COVID-19.
Oh, you're right.
It was COVID. It was literally November or something.
It was Christmas.
Yeah.
December 2019.
That's what I mean. So it'll be 2 years in September, won't it?
Yeah. Wow.
No, it'll be
three years.
It'll be 3 years. Sorry, 3.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of count, but
I think we got our numbers wrong, dude. But I mean, we should look it up. I mean, it's definitely about a year now, at least. It's not been that long. It's not 3 years, that's for sure.
Oh, I think it is. I think it is.
No, it came out in November 2020, so it would be 2 years.
Oh, okay, so we're 1 year off.
Yeah.
that's why I was. Yeah, two
It
felt
feels.
about
It
right.
does feel like a long time
Two
because
felt
like
right.
COVID has skewed everything, including time.
Mm.
But let's get back to this before we get too philosophical, about everything, right? Now, getting past kind of like Xbox and Sony, I think the one question I pose, and I don't think we need to answer this right now, it is the benefit of Steam Deck really about portables or something else?
Mm.
Yeah. And I think we'll get to that in a minute, and I'll kind of, we'll try and expand upon that. Moving on, kind of when I looked at the Steam Deck, I thought to myself, the PC in your pocket, yeah. So we know that the Steam Deck's immediate competition is obviously the Nintendo Switch, and let's call it the OLED because that's the new product on the block. But the reality is, I'm using the word competition in very tongue in cheek because we know that obviously the Nintendo Switch blows it out of the water in terms of sales numbers.
Mm.
Okay, but if we look at it, like comparably, we know that the Steam Deck is using AMD technology. What is, I would say, AMD APU technology. There really is SteamOS Linux ecosystem. Yeah, that's what SteamOS is. Nintendo is Nvidia, Tegra X1, a custom version of that, and obviously that's the Nintendo ecosystem. Very comparable in terms of cores for Nintendo single-threaded, Steam Deck's not. It's dual-threaded, so 8 threads. But if you look down the specs, Steam Deck is obviously far and away the more powerful product. No
Mm.
doubt about that. Yeah, no doubt about that whatsoever. Aside from maybe the screen, okay. What's interesting, I think, is the cost.
Mm.
Yeah, the fact that Steam or Valve have been able to offer this product at the prices they're offering it. And I don't know what they've done to do that. If I'm being absolutely honest with you,
Classic loss
right?
leader, I think. I think that's the only way that makes sense.
The only thing about that doesn't make any sense, right? I feel quite sure that there's no leadership to be had for Valve here. If you know what I mean, in terms of a portable device, there can't be. Yeah, no way. But and one more thing I'll say about Nintendo is that they've got the right idea about battery life. Yeah, I think it's a very and I don't know why it is. Right, everybody talks about it when you're reviewing the product or using a product, but the battery life, compared to some of the other handhelds, is massive.
Mm.
So, sorry,
Yeah,
that's
no doubt.
that's the Steam Deck. You're saying?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no. The Nintendo
The Switch,
Switch.
yeah.
So it's there's just a lot more battery life. I think it's for me. It's always better to look at the lower end of the range than than the higher end of the range.
Yeah, because it's like those classic things where they say your mobile can last like 48 hours, but you're doing nothing with it.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah, the Switch is not very good. It's like 3 hours or something like that. But then the revised model, I think, does 4 to 6, depending on what game you do.
Yeah. Bigger. It's a bigger unit, isn't it? Yeah, bigger unit. But the Steam Deck itself, in terms of like PC, has actually other competitors. There's a company called Aya who have the Aya Neo, Aya Neo Pro, and there's the One X player. And I've kind of, I compared basically what they look like. Now, straight off the bat, we know that these other products, they're just basically Windows products. They're literally pocket Windows products. So they're running stuff like Windows 10 or 11 as is, effectively. And I've always maintained, hell, that can never work on a little tiny device with a joystick. Surely not, right? even touchscreen or not, it just doesn't work that well.
Yeah.
And the irony of this is that the Steam Deck is the only device out of the lot that has a trackpad that has any hope of emulating a mouse on the move. These guys don't. But the hardware itself is, it's reasonably comparable. It's there's, the majority of the market is AMD focused. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're looking at between 6 to 8 core chips for these other products, between 12 to 16 threads, and comparable clock speeds, really, if I'm being honest. A 1.8 low to maybe kind of like a 4.4 high.
Yeah.
And AMD kind of like Vega graphics rather than the new RDNA. Okay? And these products also they go up in price in terms of the storage they provide. And the majority of them are SSD devices. That's what they do. For all intents and purposes, they're all very similar. But this is the thing here. The Steam Deck, the highest end SKU, and highest end because it gives you a 512 gigabyte M.2 SSD, £569. These other types of Windows devices, they go up to £1,629. And I might add, these devices in terms of pure CPU and GPU power are run below the Steam Deck.
Yep.
It's a good price to Steam Deck, isn't it, for what it is?
But that's
very
that
good.
is insane. It's feature rich as well. There's just so much stuff on there, and that's why I think it's a lost leader. I think unless Gabe Newell managed to get some really good deals with AMD and everyone else,
So
he must be making a loss per console.
So the way I see it is they've built a platform now, haven't they? Designing all of the components is very expensive, right? Over time, and they'll keep the design the same, won't they? They'll just keep replacing the chips every couple of years. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Valve probably have a bit more buying power than some of these other small companies who are producing these portable PCs. But yeah, it's a sight to behold. And whilst I'm saying it's kind of AMD dominated in terms of the pocket PCs, there are some Intel variants who seem to basically really kind of utilize Tiger Lake chips, which is a generation or two down, but those were widely considered to be really good kind of like laptop mobile chips. Yeah. But again, doesn't affect the price. They're still vastly more expensive than the Steam Deck. So how does the market look actually? I mean, really, in general, all these devices seem to have vibration and rumble. The 1X player GDP Win offer Intel parts, but the market is definitely primarily kind of AMD based. The GPD Win products have a very different kind of form factor. Yeah, they're kind of like they have a little kind of built-in keyboard, so they're like almost kind of a gaming watch laptop, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And most units will offer you a dock, so you can use them as a standard kind of like PC. Some even offer you an external GPU option. But the negative side of things here is that the high-end versions of these handhelds are actually approaching laptop prices. So what do you do? What do you choose here? You choose the laptop, or do you choose this little gaming device? And these gaming devices aren't that small in comparison. Yeah. Not at all.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. It just depends on how much power you need, when you want to use it, and yeah, like you say, the laptops. Actually, there's some really powerful gaming laptops out there, especially in terms of the price points that they're pushing. You may want to have that as an alternative.
I mean, I was just going to say that this is marketed to those obviously who've got a Steam account, right? And people who specifically got games that have lots of non-graphically intensive games, and they can play those games on the move, right? So those kind of people, I don't think they've been playing those games on a laptop, thinking, well, I'll playing these simple games on a clunky laptop. I'd rather be able to play on the move or feel more comfortable on my sofa. That's what this is aimed for. So I just don't think it was ever going to compete with those laptops. Obviously, the price and some of the other competitors, it doesn't really make sense, right? But yeah, I can definitely see this being even more popular than it already has been.
Yeah, I kind of think these outright kind of portable PC, pocket PC products, obviously they are definitely competing with kind of like lower end to medium end kind of laptops, like your 13 to 14-inch screen laptops. Yeah.
Price wise, but I think functionally, I don't. You think they would? PC gamers don't mind spending a lot more money than your
Yeah.
casual gamers.
Yeah, I still can't get it through my head how Windows is going to work on a tiny device with a small screen real estate. If you know what I mean. That's the part that I don't practically, for me, it just doesn't function very well. You know what I mean? From a whole UX experience, how is that going to work? Where the Steam Deck itself is a very different beast because it's on a different ecosystem. It has a very specific OS that it kind of like where it launches some of this stuff. I mean, they allow you to use Windows on it, but it's not a Windows device. And it's when you get it, it's not Windows device. It's something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, which leads me to my next point. Steam Deck it's a Linux machine that uses Proton, and so let's just say, what is Proton? And let me just kind of read this from Wikipedia. Proton is a compatibility layer for Microsoft Windows games to run on Linux-based operating systems. Proton is developed by Valve in cooperation with developers from Codeweavers. It is a collection of software and libraries combined with a patched version of Wine to improve performance and compatibility with Windows games. Proton is designed for integration into the Steam client known as Steam Play. It is officially distributed through the client, although third-party forks can be manually installed. It is a fork of Wine. And we won't get into what Wine is, but that's a well-known kind of like that's well-known in the kind of Linux space. But what I'm trying to say here is that with Proton improving because of Steam Deck, this is going to improve Linux gaming.
It would make it more available, I think. You would expect it would at least help the library of games on Linux.
Yeah. You imagine like Valve themselves are doing all this work to make Steam games. I mean, I think they were saying like the top 100 Steam games, right, now work with Steam Deck. No problem. Okay. So does that not imply that Valve are really just improving Linux gaming?
So what? That's a hidden veiled attack at Microsoft.
I'm just saying that the facts speak for themselves. First of all, you are a SteamOS Linux ecosystem. Second of all, the technical layer you're using to run these games, Proton, is a Linux technical layer, and you're basically making the games work with it. And does that mean ultimately at some point down the line when they've kind of gone through this exercise, there actually might even be a Steam console?
Yeah, but maybe this is also just the fact that you don't have to worry about Windows licensing as a result. So just to keep the cost down, because a lot, same with laptops, there is a Windows 10, Windows 7 license associated with every single purchase, normally anyway.
Yeah.
But I suspect that dealing with the Windows license, which is basically a sum of money, right, is just basically far simpler than trying to basically
work around
get games working with this thing. You know what I mean? This to me feels like a bigger endeavor, but yet they're going down this route. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we know that Steam Deck can work with Windows. We know that, right? But yet, there Valve are continuing with their little journey with Proton and what is Linux. So I do wonder about that. I do wonder, you know, I mean, you hear about all the kind of like the Xbox and PlayStation people. Oh yeah, yeah, Steam Deck. It's definitely a Xbox or PlayStation handheld. And I
Uh-huh.
thought, what are you guys talking about? You know, what are you talking about? This device, it's a Linux device. You know, it's a Linux device. I mean, even the obviously the PC guys, and at least from their perspective, you can basically install Windows on it. But yeah, yeah, guys, it's a Linux device that you can play PC games on. That's what it is. Yeah.
Mm.
So I just thought that was an interesting perspective on the whole conversation, right? That people aren't really kind of considering or necessarily thinking about. Yeah. This kind of like this is bringing up another facet of gaming, which is gaming on Linux, and really no one's really considering it. It's just like for some reason, right? The Steam Deck's just become the portable poster child for all sorts of other kind of like platforms, ecosystems, but really it's an entirely different ecosystem that it sits in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was really my take on it anyway. And I think, guys, with that said, it is time to move on to our next topic. Okay, guys, so the next thing I want to get into is really that ongoing fight between Xbox and PlayStation. So I've kind of titled this The Looming Threat of Xbox. What's Sony's plan? So let's set the scene a little bit, okay? So clearly Game Pass casts a massive shadow over gaming, over PlayStation, mostly everything. But what are the numbers? So the current state of play in terms of console sales as of March 2022, we're talking about 18.76 million PS5 sold versus Xbox Series X and S 12.81 million. So I was kind of thinking, like, is 2022 the launch pad for more Xbox? Yeah, possibly, right? I mean, because it's doing much better than it has in the previous generation, and maybe ever. Yeah. So what we're seeing is that from January to February in 2021, the PS5 actually sold over 500,000 more units than the Xbox Series X and S. But January to February 2022, PS5 has sold 1.11 million units, whereas the Xbox Series X and S has sold 1.02 million units. So it's kind of converging. It's getting closer.
Yeah, were those UK stats or was it like a global stats?
I believe those are global, actually. Yeah, they're global
They will be
stats.
global. The thing is, there's other factors as well, right? There's supply chain constraints in terms of building the components. Also, the fact that Xbox has a cheaper console with cheaper parts. It would be interesting to know how much of the Xbox numbers are made up of the Series S model, which boosts the numbers. But even stepping back from that, I think it's very interesting how Xbox have done pretty well in terms of units sold, considering they haven't really had that many banging first-party games come out. I think the back catalogue is quite deep on Game Pass, which has probably helped. And yeah, and interesting to see how they'll do this year, given they've had a couple of big games that have been pushed to 2023. But they've done on the surface, they've seemed done pretty well compared to the previous generations and keeping up.
Correct. And really, you might say that Game Pass is their big banging first party product. Do they need those exclusives? With a service like that? But it's interesting. It's interesting information. I mean, Xbox Series X and S selling better than Xbox 360 in the same kind of like time window, and Xbox X and S has outsold PS5 in Japan for the first time in almost a decade, and I think this happened. I think this month. Yeah.
But what's the catalyst for that though? Because there's no Japanese game, so it has
Must be
to be
supply. Must be supply.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, potentially, the other assumption is that Japanese gamers just want to play Japanese games, but like that's not necessarily the whole truth,
It's true.
right?
Yeah.
I'm also guessing that Japan like their small compact products,
Mm.
and I think the Xbox Series S kind of represents that.
Well, yeah, especially in comparison to the PS5.
Yeah, and the Xbox Series X, big units. Yeah.
Mm.
What we can say now is that we know for sure PlayStation 5 is selling worse than the PS4 during the same time window, but it started better, and it's still close, but the numbers don't lie. It's doing worse, and we actually don't have right now information regarding the split between Xbox Series X and S sales, or PS5 disc or discless. I don't think that information is widely available at the moment. Okay.
And just to be clear, these numbers are actual units sold to the customer versus shipped
Sell-through.
shipped to the
Yeah.
retailer stores, and we know most of them sell out in retail stores anyway.
Yeah. The sell-through. I don't actually think Sony kind of deliver numbers in any other way. I don't think they've done that for a while. Still impressive numbers, supply constraint or not, issues or not. But there's that looming threat of Xbox. They're very close. Breathing down Sony's neck.
Well, in terms of a long-term play, I mean, if you think about, as you said, Game Pass being their main product, once you're on there, you're going to be hooked. It's the same as having a Netflix, right? To leave will be very, very hard.
Oh, people are cancelling subscriptions.
They are starting to now.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I know where this is leading. We'll get into that. We can say it certainly at the start of the year. The outlook for Xbox looking pretty good. They're not a punch bag. This generation, no way. What can we really kind of like say about the current gen? Yeah, well, really so far it's been about cross-gen plus services, and really Xbox has had kind of Halo and Forza release in the last year, 2021 Q4. Both games cross-gen. PlayStation had Horizon and Gran Turismo in, I think it was Q1 2022. Again, cross-gen. We know supply issues persist, though it can be said that getting an Xbox is a little easier, or has been a little easier.
Yep.
Game Pass has 25 million subscribers as of Jan 2022. PS Plus has 48 million subscribers as of December 2021. Yeah. Now, Microsoft reports that Xbox had a record Q1 2022 in earnings.
What, in terms of Game Pass?
In terms of the Xbox business out, the Xbox business in its entirety. Whereas Sony's recording the second largest quarterly revenue for PlayStation during the holiday period, 2021. That was $7.15 billion in that, I guess, the quarter. And that's basically higher than any other platform holder. And I just kind of said, ever. Yeah.
It's interesting how PlayStation have kept the PS Plus brand in terms of their Game Pass. They can say the numbers
Correct.
are high, because I still don't think they're gonna have the same translation of people to the higher tiers, which are closer to Game Pass but nowhere near Game Pass because they don't have the first party day one. But
yeah, it's not that hook of a day on day kind of first. Yeah.
No, but it does actually reinforce what you're saying, that Xbox is breathing down Sony's neck now. It really is.
And I just thought that we should give special consideration that there's about 100 million Xbox Gold subscribers. How, I don't know, but those are the figures I've seen. Yeah. It's also worthy to note that PS4, Xbox One still being sold, and we're still in this cross-gen phase. We haven't left it, and it'll probably go on for a little bit longer because of the issues that we're having.
So, a question on the Xbox Gold subscribers, is that mostly console numbers, or does that have a bit of
Unsure.
PC as well?
I would have thought it had to have some PC in there, but I can't remember Xbox Gold for PC.
Yeah, I think you could probably. I think it had some level of Windows stuff on it, Xbox Gold, but that must predominantly be for the standard Xbox.
Could be people who have got some, legacy Xbox consoles, and I guess with Game Pass also, Xbox Gold comes with the higher tier, comes with Games Pass, so those numbers are factored in there as well. It's still a number.
Right,
That's
okay.
a big number.
It's a massive number. It's interesting because there's a new European regulation where you can't just let customers persist on a subscription if they're not using it. You have to give them a warning that you're going to cut them off within 30 days if they've not been active, and then actually cut them off and stop payments.
Intriguing.
I don't know when that's coming into an effect.
It's in effect already because Xbox.
Oh, is it?
first.
Okay, yeah.
They've already kind of remediated that, and
Yeah.
then PlayStation did it. That's already happened.
Right, okay, there you go. So these numbers are going to change then, aren't they? Let's see. So the playing field might get even
Indeed,
greater.
but it's interesting. It is very interesting. And I will say, as a last point, let's not forget, currently, the Nintendo Switch is still the best-selling current-gen console. Don't forget that, you Xbox and PlayStation fanboys.
Yeah. It's last gen tech
it's
now, isn't it, really?
whenever Nintendo decide to refresh their tech. It's like this is their current gen. You know what I mean? Until they decide to basically move over. So with all that said, with kind of Xbox kind of really breathing down Sony's neck, how we want to consume games kind of really changing, and really kind of Xbox and Microsoft really changing the kind of like playing field. Does Sony have a plan? Because Xbox has one. They've got one, right? So far, what's their plan? Well, we've got a new version of PS Plus that will launch in June. And it's being kind of rolled out across different regions. I think it's end of May, region by region. I don't think we're even going to get it in the US or the UK first. Confusingly, there are 3 membership options. PS Plus Essential, which is current day PS Plus, PS Plus Extra, and PS Plus Premium. And running down these things, PS Plus Essential, same as PS Plus current day, so nothing much to kind of talk on there, but you get your 2 free monthly game downloads and exclusive discounts, cloud saves, and online multiplayer access. PlayStation Plus Extra provides all the benefits of the Essential tier and adds a catalogue of up to 400 games, mostly on PS4 and PS5. And those games will rotate as well. That's been basically announced. So not really that much different from I would say, Game Pass. So what they've announced so far is, Death Stranding, God of War, Mortal Kombat 11, Returnal, and the Spider-Man games. And there's more actually. They recently kind of updated PlayStation blog to list out, many more games that's going to be as part of the service. Not the entire list, but I think they talked about between 50 to 100 games. Yeah, they just outlined them. Now, PS Plus Premium provides, again, all the benefits of Essential, Extra, plus adds 340 additional games, including PS3 games via cloud streaming, a catalogue of classic games available in both streaming and download options for PlayStation, PS2 and PSP, cloud streaming access for PlayStation, PS2, PSP and PS4 games. And they've also said that PS Now has been, or I should say their streaming service has been expanded across more countries, which I found quite strange. You can stream these games on PS4, PS5 and PC. And there's also that time-limited trials service that we've kind of talked about before. So effectively, customers can try before they buy. And to a degree, Sony have almost mandated this. It's for games that cost $34.99 and above. And they've got to offer the trial within 3 months of release. And back in the day, this was discussed by kind of Trip Hawkins in and around PS Now. That gamers could, try before they buy. But back then, there was a significant pushback from creators and publishers.
So the interesting thing is, if they can create a mechanism where the game developers don't have to create a demo package, which is obviously more work, i.e. PlayStation has a timer and the game gets deleted off the console.
That's exactly how it works.
Yeah, okay, great.
Developers don't have to do anything apparently, but PlayStation does the work, and it's probably it's a counter. It's a 2-hour counter from the time they start the game rather than from the time they download the game. It's kind of like, it's an interesting way. I mean, they're really forcing the issue.
Yeah. I remember in Destiny 2, like the first campaign had like parts of the campaign that made you think it had the persistent features of the game that didn't disappear.
Yeah, I mean, all this could change really. Sony, they own the service. They'll obviously collect the data they need to say is it worth doing. I just think, on the face of it, game trials, what we used to call game demos, is pretty consumer friendly. Why not try before you buy?
It feels like Sony is shoehorning a feature in to justify their higher price versus having anything really substantial.
I don't like the tiers myself, but we'll get into that. But yeah, I mean, I do think having games trials at that tier seems a bit weird, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it should be open to all of them, really.
Yeah, I kind of felt that you should have played that a little bit differently. But again, the service can change. It will be about competition at the end of the day. But as you said, it feels like some of these things should be open to all the tiers, but I just think they got one too many tiers.
Probably, yeah.
3 tiers, difficult to understand.
What's the
right?
what's the price difference?
It's very complicated.
But it's one too many tiers in my view. It's whatever they feel they can get away with. We'll have to watch this space and see what happens. But obviously, they've absolutely confirmed it won't offer day-on-date first-party games. However, in an interview, they're not really shutting the door on that. They just said not now. Now, I don't ever think they will do an Xbox and say every first-party game that we produce on Game Pass. I still maintain they're not big enough as a company to absorb that sort of cost.
It's quite crazy to do that, especially when there's enough hype around certain games.
They're not big enough. I mean, they're not a trillion dollar company like a Microsoft is.
I also, without going off on a tangent, I don't think we've really seen the impact on game design off the back of Microsoft having Game Pass with their first-party games on. I suspect they are going to lean towards more games as a service.
Potentially.
And with Sony, with their first-party single-player games that have been very successful, it would break that model as well. So, I was a bit frustrated that PlayStation didn't add that, but I can also see how it can impact game design, and that's one thing I don't want. I want both companies to experiment and come up with new features and evolve game design, but not break it.
But if you imagine that the financials involved in a service like Game Pass, not necessarily Game Pass, or a service like it, could mean that you have to shorten games and provide less content, because the bottom line tells you that it's just too damn expensive to make them like that, and the only way I'm going to get my money back is to provide shorter, more episodic content.
It will be, yeah. No, that exactly. So, for example, let's just take I think Motorsport, Forza Motorsport 8 is the next one, and you've got Gran Turismo. I can imagine them bleeding all of the cars released over multi-years on Xbox to keep that, and they even bleed out all the tracks. I mean, I'll actually go fast.
They're going to do it, right? Microtransactions.
They'll have to.
DLC.
Not even just that, Al. That's going to happen regardless, right? Because that model exists already. But it's like companies will start saying, "I don't want to risk investing all this money into this game. I have to basically release a limited version of my vision, because I can't spend that sort of money because the returns aren't there anymore."
Yeah, and if it ends up being a flop, right? So why put yourself through all that risk?
There's a risk and reward. All of it. It's just return on investment. Some gamers listening to us goes, "Shut the F up." You know what I mean? But that's reality, guys. That's the reality, right? We're dealing with multi-million, multi-billion, and in some cases multi-trillion companies here. How do you think they got there? They're not charities, so This is the looming threat of maybe a service like this as well. Because for every good thing that's on Netflix, there's probably about 5 or 10 horrible pieces of content.
I would say 80-20, 20% reasonably good stuff with, and then that 20%,
Yeah.
5% is good, as in a quarter, and the rest is junk. I think that it has the potential to have exciting, more experimental game design in Xbox, right? Given their culture, I think they can promote that. And I think a game is fine if it's small, but as long as it's taking risks. If it's the same game as the previous one, they've just artificially stretched it out, I think all gamers will have get very frustrated by that. One point I wanted to make, right, is amongst all this transition to games subscription service, managing your studios effectively is absolutely critical.
And we're going to talk about that.
Okay, great. Okay, Sony's Sony are much stronger in that.
It's a big factor actually, and we're seeing that right now. It's a big factor. Getting back to what Sony's plan is, that the fact they've got, I think, one too many tiers, right? We talked on day and date, but really, we still haven't got local PS3 emulation. But their rumor is now they're working on it. Yeah, and
yeah, I heard that as well. Yeah,
it's actually quite interesting because I do think, right, that whether we have local PS3 emulation or not, it's not for everybody. It's just for people like us who are in love with our games and like technology. It's not going to be for the masses.
But don't you think that that's the driving force between the tiers on Sony's current tiering system, and the people who are going to subscribe to these services are
Correct.
The hardcore gamers initially. So it is important.
It's not because of the numbers necessarily, if you know what I mean. Because the numbers will mostly be on the PS Plus side, then the middle tier, and then obviously the real hardcore. The people who like kind of retro games and the history of games and whatnot and have had a long experience. That's where they all want to sit. But let's get back to the interesting part of this conversation, which is like there could be a local PS3 emulator. But what I heard recently, and I think it was on Sacred Symbols, is that PS3 games employed really different techniques to get around the limitations of, let's say, the cell processor. And we know that because it was horribly difficult to kind of develop for. The GPU on the PS3 was actually comparably low powered. So they had to find a way to redress the balance, if you like. As an example, there's one specific anti-aliasing technique called MSAA. And it actually did that by distributing workload across all the cells cores or their SPUs. They did really kind of specific things like that, custom things like that, to get more out of the PS3 architecture. So what they said that was quite interesting, which made perfect sense to me, is that the emulator has to work almost as many different emulators, dealing with the different techniques that maybe kind of specific engines applied. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so difficult to get an emulator out. And there is a PC emulator out there, right? And it's doing a reasonable job. The thing is, with that emulator, you need the highest tier of consumer PC to run it well, right? And people, the way they basically tune that thing, right, is they actually have to switch off stuff like MSAA because it's so kind of intensive. So it definitely is a challenge. The more I kind of hear about what's having to be done, it definitely is a challenge. The techniques employed are very kind of like custom. They also go against the grain of how we typically develop games now, because everything's on the GPU. It's not on the CPU. We don't do that sort of stuff on the CPU. This is something to consider. But that's exciting, I think. If they got that up to the highest tier, I'd be excited by that. But I'm a geek, so...
I'm just thinking it must have been hell for PS3 developers.
Yeah, but look at the results. It was hell, but I mean, look at the results, yeah. The other thing that I would call out is that the way that the backwards compatibility works right now is you can't really play your retro game collection from the disc. You just can't. On the PS5, one of the reasons you can't is that you can't even read the disc.
So there's a hardware limitation.
There's a hardware limitation. So you can't even do it.
But that was probably for anti-piracy reasons, right?
They just didn't build it into the unit, and it was probably cost considerations.
If their plan is to eventually have every single PS1, PS2, well, actually, in fact, I'll take that back. They're never going to have every game, are they? Because they won't have the licenses for every game. So that is a bit of a bummer, isn't it? Whereas Xbox own. Does Xbox own the license to every single game published? No, so they're the same challenge.
It's just
right?
that they must have been based on at least a
Yeah.
Windows form factor before, so they probably were a little bit easier to backward compatible.
I don't know if it
No?
is, Al, because they even have challenges with music licensing in game.
Yeah. I'm not talking about whether Microsoft are able to get every single game. I'm talking about whether they have the licensing to put it even on. And I think
Well, they'd have to have
But
the new agreement with whoever owns the rights to it.
All expensive stuff.
But if you've got the Xbox disc, can you play
On the Xbox, I
that
believe
on the
you
new?
can. But then again, that's
okay,
not every game. Yeah, on the PlayStation, no, because physically you can't. Yeah, I mean, what they should consider is, hell, we scan barcodes all of the time, right? Do something along those lines. Have it tied to your account once you do that, because obviously, when PlayStation 1 was around, PlayStation 2, there was no kind of like, PSN. Not a good version of it anyway. It's not a real fix really, but it's a way to get around that and show a little bit more kind of respect to to the consumers. The other thing that I'd say is notable by its absence is PS Vita. I'm thinking they may save that for a future iteration, because I hope they do it actually, because there were some stellar things on PS Vita but they can deliver it over time. So I do believe it will come, and it should. The PS Vita's challenge it's like we talked about PSVR. It's the physical aspects of that hardware. PS Vita had the back touchpad. It had the touchscreen. It had all these other controls, right? And that's where there's going to be a challenge. And that's where I think they've skipped it for
They've
now
skipped it,
until they can
basically, I
find
think,
some solutions around this.
Yeah, the question I had was all of the tiering on PlayStation and all of even the marketing on the Xbox side around the back catalogue. How long do you think people will be really interested in playing older games before the people go, well, that's great, and then it becomes only, well, Xbox has the first party, so then really that's really what I want. Because that's when Sony's going to have a problem.
Depends on if there's enough new content to keep people busy. If there's not enough new content, people will go back to their back catalogue, their retro games, play a bit of that to keep themselves busy.
Yeah, I just somewhere think that the people that had nostalgia from those games are much older and have far less time, and they like the romantic idea of having access to it. But will they really pay for it? And then will they really pay for it on a persistent period to actually have a subscription for a long period to warrant Sony and Xbox having the service? That's where Xbox shines, because it's got the first parties day one going forward. And I think what I'm basically saying is I think PlayStation will be forced into a corner where they're going to have to put the first parties on there as well.
But not necessarily every first party game. I don't know that will do that. But look, to get back to your whole backwards compatibility question, I think it's a two-tiered question. Because I think, number one, right, there is a massive retro scene at the moment. People out there, young and old, who seem to want to play these retro games. And there's obviously, connected to that, there's the game preservation slant, which is, to my mind, kind of building a little bit more traction these days. I mean, it's not massive, compared to everybody that plays games, but it exists. The other thing is this whole backwards compatibility, and with this old content, will technology one day get it to a point where it kind of looks okay on modern screens and modern technology? It gives it an extra set of legs. It does not really place or substitute, let's say, day on day first party games, but there's definitely a kind of like group in the community who want this sort of thing. It's just good PR, if not anything else. There are people out there who are restoring old consoles, collecting old console games. They're building kind of emulation with FPGAs and hardware. It's all real stuff, and I'm seeing it more and more. You know what I mean? So I guess it's like people kind of like buying vintage clothes or something, or wanting to dance to kind of seriously bad kind of 80s music.
Yeah, they went through the whole mini series, and so
yeah,
it made good money.
Yeah,
and that nostalgia people still hold on to. I bought what was it, the Mass Effect remaster. I've touched it for maybe like an hour.
Well, let me put it this way: in a video streaming service, would you not expect to be able to watch old films?
Yep. It may be in rotation, maybe not all of them.
No, but you'd want some, right? People kind of talk about, the greatest films of all time, like Star Wars, Citizen Kane, It's a Wonderful Life. You know what I mean? There's an expectation.
It fills up the numbers as well,
Course,
doesn't it?
yeah.
And you can use all of the logos and
Yeah.
stuff in marketing. So it's kind of the reality of how much people do play those retro games or actually watch those retro films. I think is much lower than people probably think.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. The power of saying you have it is disproportionate to the actual use of that content, I think.
Well, it's the same as even just having games in your library that we've not even played.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is why I've said, these sorts of game services may not be as valuable or practically valuable as you think. Giving all this shade about kind of like PlayStation's new service and their tiers, the reality is there's good value here, because ultimately it gives you access, if the numbers are correct, to 740 games, and some of which obviously rotate in and out. It does offer game trials, which, on the face of it, seem consumer friendly. Again, the new PS Plus service, it's kind of safe, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't do anything that you wouldn't expect it to do, almost.
I'm still missing the price, because I can't. If without the price, I can't tell you if it's good value.
The price is out. What I did, I kind of broke it down. So, how did I compare it? So I said it would be better to compare Xbox Gold versus PS Plus Essential, or current day PS Plus, because the reality, and I don't know why people are not saying this, that is the comparison. That is the like-for-like service, not PS Plus versus Game Pass.
Yeah.
We should compare Game Pass vs PS Plus Extra or PS Plus Premium. That's the comparison. Let's go through the list. Yeah, let's go through the information. So Xbox Gold, $6.99 a month. As much as I could see, there was no yearly charging model. Well, at least I couldn't find one. PS Plus Essential, or the current day PS Plus, is also $6.99, and it's effectively $49.99 for the year, which boils down to £4.20 per month when you basically do the math. So that gives you obviously multiplayer, 2 monthly free games, cloud saves, membership discounts. For PS Plus, they give you one additional thing, which is this PS collection, these 20 games or so. A small curated game collection, which is, decent enough. Now, when you start comparing, let's say, Xbox Game Pass, so let's compare it to PS Plus Extra. So obviously, all the same things as Xbox Gold and PS Plus Essential, but let's say every one of those services gives you 100 plus games. PS Plus Extra, they give you a kind of a boundary and they say 400, but it's 100 plus. Xbox Game Pass gives you game streaming, PS Plus Extra does not. You get EA Pass with Xbox Game Pass, and you get day-on-day new releases with Xbox Game Pass. Cloud-enabled browser play, that's Xbox, but I think that's more about streaming and playing games on a web browser, that sort of thing. Both no PC games. I would say Xbox Game Pass gives you some retro games. Both don't give you this games trials feature, but really, with 100 plus games, 400 games, in many ways, kind of who cares, but you do get day on day with Game Pass as well, so that's kind of like one up. So the cost is $7.99 for Game Pass, $10.99 PS Plus Extra. Again, I couldn't see an annual charging model for Game Pass. For PS Plus Extra, that's about $83.99 or £6.99 a month. In my mind, it feels like there's a definite, well, not quite definite, there's a win here for Game Pass. I think that's clear to me. When we get to the highest tier, you've got everything above. Xbox Game Pass has got 100 plus games But for Xbox and PC, you'll get 740 games for PS Plus Premium, PC gaming for the Game Pass Ultimate, retro gamings for both, and I would say game trials for PS Plus Premium. And what are the costs? £10.99 for Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, £13.49 for PS Plus Premium. Again, yearly or annual charging model, that's £99.99. That's about £8.33 per month. It's very comparable. I think the last tier is actually very, very comparable. And you might say the last tier, in terms of cost, is closer to Xbox Game Pass than you might think. They're comparable services. It's just how much do you want the day and day?
Yeah.
How much do you want that? So those are the numbers. That's the comparison. Now, so again, does PlayStation have a plan? Well, then Armchair CEO now speaks. So obviously, there's more than two things. There's a number of things. I think the new PS Plus has just got too many tiers, and I'm also thinking, does the standard PS Plus Essential, should it even exist? Because why not update it and put a bit more pressure on Xbox Gold or Game Pass or whatever it may be? And I just felt it should have been two tiers. So you have your kind of standard PlayStation Plus with the same benefits as of today, $6.99 per month, but you get your monthly downloads, your discounts, your cloud storage, your online multiplayer access, which, to my mind, these things shouldn't even be a thing anymore, if you know what I mean. Yeah, but give people a new PS collection, but extend it to 100 games, and rotate that in and out. And by all means, have retro games in there, and have all those big hitters, those legacy or older big hitters that you're talking about. Okay, and maybe for the premium tier, have all of that, but price at $11.99. Let's say 640 additional games. Yeah, PS3 games as per usual. You know, all of that sort of good stuff. Streaming, if you really want that. Okay. Time limited game trials I've kind of left on this upper tier, but to be honest, you could have them on both tiers, have one locked at 2 hours and have another locked at between 3 to 4 hours or something, if you know what I mean. Yeah, to me that would have been a more compelling offering. If you're not going to basically do day on day kind of releases and all that kind of stuff. But obviously they didn't do that, and I don't think it's bad. I just think it just feels like almost a little bit of a missed opportunity, or Sony are just treading very, very carefully, erring on the side of caution, watching what happens, which is like what I think they've been doing lately. So
I mean, I've got some thoughts. I don't know, Jay, if you've got any specific thoughts on this one.
I personally am not going to subscribe to this. It's not strong enough for me.
But you'd still need the basic tier, not for things like Destiny.
That's not subscribing to anything new, is it? And I've already got that. The games in the first tier up, the PlayStation Plus, are I'm happy to just buy them because they're reasonably cheap now. And then going to the tier above, there isn't enough to really sway me. I mean, I like the idea of those retro games. I just don't think I will play many of them. But that's its current state now. I do think that they'll get forced into doing first party eventually, and then I would subscribe. But PlayStation have a lot of regular sales on a lot of those games, and as soon as those games are on, well, this is an interesting thing. Those games that they have regular sales on, once they're on the higher tiers of PlayStation Plus, will they not have those sales? Probably. To push people towards it, but I just don't. I agree. Was on the points before. Too many tiers. It's confusing. I don't think they're strong enough for people to subscribe to them, other than the hardest of hardcore. I feel like it's going to flop a little bit, like PlayStation Now has. But it won't. They cleverly kept the name the same, so it won't look like a flop. So. but it will be a flop. And coming back to the ultimate question, which is, do they have a plan? They do have a plan, but for me, it's wrong. They are what their plan is. They're fundamentally going to lose, because any company that starts from we're ahead and we're going to try and preserve being ahead, you will always fail eventually, because all your decisions are going to be around protecting what you've already got.
It doesn't even involve day on day releases.
Where's the they bought Crunchyroll, you get access to some of the content there, or you get access to some of the Sony movies, or they've invested in Evo, and you get, dare I say it, some NFTs or some new avatar stickers to put on your profile, or you get special back access to some of the interviews of some of the people.
I think they'll have one more
contenders. I don't know. It's just weak.
I just think that I just hope they've got a wrong
it's weak.
I don't think they need more tiers. I just think they need to bolster.
I don't think they have to. So I think I understand what they're trying to do here. Like, leaving PlayStation Plus alone, because they've got a huge number of people still on PlayStation 4. Just why would they offer anything extra in that existing current place? There's no real reason for them to do that, unless they're really trying to grab back some kind of market. But I don't think they have to.
It's not grabbing back market, Al. It's not losing it. That's the problem. Yeah.
But they have there's no other reason to offer more. Xbox may be offering really, really good value from a Xbox Game Pass perspective, but as we've been saying, I think if they put their kind of first party titles on there, that's actually going to be detrimental. They're going to lose so many sales, and it just feels like they can't afford to do that.
Yeah, I don't feel they need to necessarily offer, let's say, day-on-day first-party releases on there. I don't. I honestly think they could actually get away with maybe offering 1 or 2 of those titles a year, and that could be the offering, plus these other levers that Jay's talked about, that we talked about in the past, because they're more than a games company. Sony, they've got a lot of different levers, but I just think this 3-tier configuration is a little bit confusing. They don't have to offer day in date releases, but it just doesn't feel that you're putting enough pressure on their competition.
And if I think about it, they probably don't need that middle tier. But I do think there's a beyond this premium tier, because if you talk about all the stuff around Crunchyroll and other things, that movies, and we've been talking about it before, I think they have to charge more, fundamentally.
Essentially.
This feels like a wet fart. It's just a boring step forward. It's just not. And that their hand is going to get forced. I mean, Microsoft have failed. I mean, it might be done on purpose, but they've flopped on their first party releases for this year. So Redfall and Starfield. But if you look at what games were planned to come out in 2023 with those 2 big titles and their Game Pass offering, they are going to have every quarter 1 or 2, at least 1 big bangers coming out.
Yeah, but I don't know. It feels like it's a loss-making business. I don't know what they're actually doing with that, and why does Sony need to compete in a loss-making business? It just doesn't make any sense.
It won't be it won't be a loss-making business, will it? So Microsoft are also going for, you buy one of those dongles to put into your TV, and more people have access to more games. I think they will have more of a push on the kind of the casual gamers as well.
They'll need those numbers.
Yeah,
because they're not going to get those numbers through the hardcore.
No, exactly.
Tell you that. What Microsoft need at the end of the day is a number of people who use the service on a regular basis to turn it from a loss lead business to something that's profitable. That's a bit of a build-up. It's not going to come because they've absorbed the kind of PlayStation Nation or the Nintendo players. That's not going to happen. They need a bit more than that.
I haven't actually ever seen someone running the numbers that if you take an average of, let's say, 5 years, what's their attach rate of the actual games? If you took the cost of someone having a perpetual Game Pass license over 5 years, would they roughly pay the same amount, or would it just slightly more? I suspect it's probably quite a similar amount.
It's probably similar.
Yeah, but they're going for a wider audience with more channels of people getting access to it.
Yeah,
This is where Sony has a fail plan because they're not going to make any bold moves. And
yeah. I think that's Sony's problem. They're not being very bold about this. Yeah, I mean, this is Jim Ryan's basically PlayStation, right? Because it's so weird. There's no big brash announcements.
But
We'll just blog
but
this.
I think we're also in this. I think they may have taken the right strategy. Maybe out of luck, though. Current climate of the world.
It slowed things
Yeah.
down. I think we all agreed that pretty much they needed to do a little bit more.
wet fart.
Yeah, it doesn't do enough really. Even if they crunched it down to 2 tiers, right? They could have bolstered what those tiers had offered, and it would have been a little bit more kind of valuable, if you know what I mean. And PS Plus and Xbox Gold right now, they're kind of dead offerings because they're the kind of offerings you want people to move off.
I can imagine Xbox getting rid of gold.
They tried to already.
Okay,
Yeah, they
so
tried to, but upping the price, and gamers basically threw up their hands.
No, what I'm saying is, if they say right, it's all free at that level.
They haven't done it yet because what they try to do was up the cost of the thing. They try and drop the numbers down. This is why I was thinking that PlayStation and Sony should just bolster the regular PS Plus right now to put them under a bit of pressure. I mean, in effect, this is our Xbox Gold, and it looks closer to Xbox Game Pass than it does anything else.
Microsoft could squeeze Sony more if they drop the gold, give it free, and condense their Game Pass to one. That will shove Sony, won't it?
They're not migrating anybody off that. They're trying to migrate them by decommissioning it. They're trying to make it a less desirable service and all of that sort of stuff.
Right, I see what you mean. Those Xbox Gold are ones that are using older hardware, but are still paying.
Yeah, why would you
Yeah,
offer
they're
it?
still
But
paying.
that's what I said earlier.
Yeah.
Why would you change that? Why would you give them more? Why would you make it free? It just makes no sense. They're just milking anyone that's just still sitting on it.
Xbox Gold won't even actually be on the Microsoft website, so you can kind of discount that a little bit, can't you?
But no one in their right
think it's
mind
still
on a new.
Well, I know, but there's 100 million people, players who are still
Someone
on
in
it, for some
Kazakhstan
reason.
that still only wants to get Xbox Gold because they don't understand what Game Pass is.
I think those were active users, weirdly enough, I'm blown away by that number, but I think the weird thing is, like, I actually might subscribe to the upper tier, and the reason I might do that is quite simple. I looked at the list and I thought, well, I haven't got some of these titles, so it might be actually alright for me to subscribe for the year. I'm not in love with the service, but I kind of, I'm looking at the numbers and I'm thinking, okay, that might be worth doing. But Jay, you're right in saying that, really, PlayStation have been really safe. Does PlayStation have a plan? Well, I hope they've got a roadmap, because there's all these levers they could pull over time. And I hope they're thinking like this, right? Because, as you say, right, I'm not a believer that they want necessarily to do everything day-on-date releases, but I think they can do some things. But if they don't do that, then there's all these like other levers you can pull.
Would you be happy if their titles were 1 year old that they came to their top tier PlayStation Plus?
Yeah, I think because these days, and again, it just depends on your circumstance here. I've got hundreds of games that I've not played, so I'm the wrong person to ask, if you know what I mean.
Doesn't retro games add to that then? Why
Yeah,
do
of
you want
course,
that?
but it doesn't really matter. Retro game is a collector's.
Collection. It's there.
Yeah, it's a
There if
collection.
you want it. If I ever have time.
Whole
Yeah,
collection,
yeah.
though, isn't it? It's just
Yeah,
stop
yeah.
subscribing.
The people that need to be asked is obviously the hardcore PlayStation fans, but equally they seem to will buy anything that Sony kind of chuck their way. So it's kind of like almost Sony having to straddle this line. We know you'll pay, but equally we know if we basically don't offer this service, we might die. It's just stuff like that. But I think that's where I see them basically just observing, waiting. That's what I feel they're going to be doing. But what could their roadmap be? I mean, it's going to be, we know, first party releases. It's too big a source of revenue, but they could offer one or two, let's say, a year. But they haven't said they wouldn't do this for third party. They haven't said that. EA and Ubisoft, offer services of their own. EA Play, Ubisoft Plus. They could integrate that in the service if they wanted. And I think they've done that with Ubisoft already. I think that's just come out. And Sony want this whole 10 plus live service games by 2026. Think on this, guys. If day on day new releases is not in PlayStation's and Sony's bag, then if they want to be sticky and they want to kind of, let's say, develop services that are sticky, then what would you do? Yeah, how do you coax somebody to basically give you their money every month? Because ultimately that's what they want to do, right? I mean, all these companies, that's what they want to do.
An addictive free-to-play game.
Thank you. Yeah. So you can see some of the strategy formulating here. We can't basically offer you first party day on date, but you know what we could do? This other thing. I'm just thinking that comes in the thought process, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, because they want to retain the model they have because that makes them so much money. But how do we become sticky? They can be sticky without the kind of investment that Microsoft are necessarily making because they can't afford to do that. They're not big enough. I keep saying they're not big enough. They're big, but they're not that big.
Can you quantify that? Because the Microsoft are big enough to buy the game studios.
It's like I would say there's enough funding for them to do this without worrying about the consequences. Whereas I think Sony do need to worry about those consequences. I don't think they could afford to just throw money at the problem right now to try and build that consumer base. They actually need to be making money off the back of it.
The narrative that you're saying is what a lot of people are saying, but I don't see the data that supports it. So, for example, if you're saying that Sony have a lead, they make X amount of revenue, and they wouldn't make the same amount of revenue by moving everything to day one on then that's fine, but that's the wrong way of looking at it. If you think about the competition is getting bigger and our position is going to get eroded over the next 5 years, and everything is going to go to a subscription anyway, and we know that, then taking a 5 or 10 year horizon, we know we're not going to sustain our model. We're going to lose it anyway, so we might as well just go head in heels now. So that's what I'm saying. No one's actually shown the numbers. 2 to 5 year, it makes sense what they're doing there if they're doing the right idea. But actually 5, 10, 15...
you can't. I think that's the problem, is that a lot of the numbers are actually hidden behind the scenes.
All we can do at the moment as spectators is speculate. And the reality is, let's just say, worst case scenario, right, for Sony, how much is it to develop a game, one of their big AAA titles? 200 million. So I guess we got to say over the number of years, how many Games Pass, whatever service subscription numbers would you need to cover that cost? Quite substantial still. And let's say they did it with every single first party game. And remember, the revenue will trickle in.
Be a small portion, minor portion in all of that, yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to get the big bang you would get in, say, the first 3 months of a sale. That's not going to happen. It will trickle feed in, potentially. So, stuff like that's got to be taken into account. It's absolutely true. If Sony weren't to do something, or they weren't to try and establish a model where they could compete, they might be gone. That's the truth of the matter. But can they? Because either way, if they just basically change the strategy, and let's say if they did it overnight, hypothetically, they'll be out of business. It's just how can they absorb that cost? I don't know if they can. And without seeing the numbers, obviously, no one really knows. No one really knows. For all we know, Game Pass is making a huge profit. But I find that so difficult to believe.
I think I'm surprised no one's done it. You could take their Sony's yearly accounts, and they'll have their R&D numbers in there and the revenue numbers in there, and you can make an estimate on the number of games they have produced or going to produce, and work out the rough costs, what they will need to recuperate on their actual games as a service equivalent, and then extrapolate that over a 2, 5, 10 year time period. And I'll be surprised if they can't actually make back the same numbers. And
it was 7.15 billion for the quarter, right?
Right, but what I'm saying is, even if they said, right, we can't do it at the same price as Game Pass, but we can do day one for $15.99 with tiers of our first party releases up to £20 a month, well, let's go full tilt on that. People might even pay.
I just
that,
think
right?
Sony. I think Sony knows. I think Sony has those numbers behind the scenes, which is why they're not doing it. I think they know how they've worked it out. Again, with the Xbox One and the Microsoft One, depending on if they've got a lot of money investment to supplement all this, then your profit and loss. If they really want to calculate it, I think they would be making a loss. But again, I'm theorizing. I don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, we're all theorising here. I mean, the other side to this is, what's it going to do to their share price? I mean, people do stupid stuff because of their share price. I mean, and the reality is, maybe they just don't like that model. That's the reality. It's like, it's not our strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Nintendo would like. So we mentioned at the top of the topic was that Microsoft's credibility of hitting the ground running in this generation is starting to falter now, and all of that goodwill is going out the window.
Correct.
Given that they've delayed some of the first, I think part of the equation for Microsoft is that they probably don't think. They think Microsoft might drop the ball in managing their studios and releases, so therefore let them fall, and then maybe we don't even have to take anything up.
Basically, if they have a roadmap, then it gives them a bit more time to fulfill it. That's the other thing. It's just like, the threat is lessened, and they could fulfill this 10 plus live services. And as we said, right, if any of those are amazing live service games, that's potentially $2 billion a year per game, right? So
exactly. One last question I had was, because I've been getting into fighting games recently, and I've noticed that the good ones, especially Arc Systems, are only on PlayStation, right? And I don't know if that's a Japanese thing, but could you imagine a world where the game studios that are left, who rely on sales, because everyone on Microsoft Game Pass gets used to, I'm only getting Game Pass, I'm not going to buy any third-party games, and those people on those consoles stick to that. Therefore, all of those third parties all shift towards PlayStation.
That's interesting, actually.
That could impact this landscape quite a bit as well, because Sony has got. We need to talk about hardcore game specialties, right? There are still a few niche games that are only PlayStation only.
That's not going to change in a while.
The behaviour patterns in this whole topic is massive.
It's quite interesting. I got to admit. I mean, let's close off the whole roadmap conversation and we'll get into the rest of this. I think, to me, Sony are going to go down the kind of live service route, because my own feeling about this live service route, it just allows them to continue on with what they're doing. And that's my sole reason for suggesting they want to do this. They probably feel it will allow us to continue on with our AAA game model, but we'll make enough money. Ultimately, guys, it's not about really how they do it. They want billions rolling in. And however they do it is however they do it. I would also say this whole backwards compatibility thing, come on, it's about bloody time we can play our PS3 games with native emulation. It's turning into a bit of a kind of like a joke, isn't it, really? And, also putting a system where, if you own the game, you don't have to buy it again. Please.
That would be quite nice.
Yeah. And, we know that PlayStation wouldn't be able, or 5 wouldn't be able to kind of play some of these older kind of games media, PS1, 2, kind of PSP, UMD, and Vita cards, obviously. But the other lever Jay's also touched upon, and we've touched upon in the past, is Sony. You've got film, TV, and music services. They've got Crunchyroll and Funimation. They've got Sony film and music content. They've got Evo in gaming tournaments. In PlayStation Productions, obviously has a universe of film and TV incoming. They've got Last of Us with Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey from Game of Thrones. They've got the Uncharted film has come out, but now they're talking about turning that into a franchise. Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. Ghost of Tsushima, they've got an action film directed by the guy who did John Wick. And they've got a Twisted Metal TV show with Anthony Mackie. God of War seems to be in negotiations with Prime Video. They got levers, right? But God knows if they're going to pull them or not. This is what they need to think about. Integration with PSVR, we talked about cross-media levers, and what are Sony really going to do with VR? Not really sure yet, but there's something there.
They could have PlayStation VR games included, because it's not the same sort of.
They do right now. They do it. I've got a whole bunch of PSVR games that came free. The other thing that people are not really thinking about is, well, they are, but they're thinking about it in terms of why are these games going to PC. You know, integration with PC in mobile ecosystems. It's gonna happen. That's where numbers are. Come on,
Yeah.
seriously.
I mean, that's why I was thinking, like, when you're saying about PlayStation, I was like, just go, all of this stuff is coming to PC. I don't care.
They just got to go where the money is, effectively. The PlayStation might be the first platform, but it won't be the only platform. Yeah, so...
I've got one last thing on this, right, which is it the wrong thing to do to compare them? Is the question I'm asking. And the reason why I'm asking that is because fundamentally I think the generation is realised, let's forget competing with them.
Yeah, remember we said earlier on, right? I
In
mean,
the same way.
If we base it on traditional dimensions that we measure, the console wars, this mythical, weird console wars thing, right? Well, Sony, they've basically shown they're the kings of that model of doing business. There's a specific model. Microsoft have come out and they've said, I'm changing the rules of engagement. I sometimes don't even think they're on the same battlefield.
Yeah, I don't think there are anymore.
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
And I would agree that I don't really know that they are. And ultimately, the longer this goes on for, I think really they'll kind of start diverging. I don't know. It feels that way to me. And I mean, sure, Sony will have a service, but I don't think they want to leave their model behind, if you know what I mean. I think they want to supplement it. Whereas Xbox seem to want to leave the old model behind.
Well, I think they've got a little bit of no choices.
Yeah, there is that. But look, for all of that said, for all the looming threat of the Xbox and how they're going to conquer gaming, right? The reality is, recently, as in the last week or two, they've decided to trade places in terms of, let's say, positive or negative press. Xbox decides to kind of really stifle its own momentum. Maybe through some fault of their own. Xbox DRM issues resulting in an outage for 4 days or something, when actually no one could play any games. Right? And I think online or offline, because the way that DRM worked, on that particular platform. And then obviously we know that, Starfield and Redfall have been delayed until the second half of 2023. And by the way, they said not second half, the first half of 2023. Correct myself. But they said half. They didn't say quarter. They were very explicit about that. And Sony, okay, new PlayStation Plus games looked actually decent. There's some good games there. They decided to be a bit more consumer friendly and said if you bought a classic game in the past, you don't need to buy it again. And you don't even need to register to PS Plus to play them on PS4 or PS5. But we're talking about digital games here, okay, just to be clear. And actually, Ben Studios recently tweeted that Siphon Filter, which is an old PS1 game that they're bringing out as part of the service, they're building trophies for it, or they have built trophies for it.
Yeah, I heard that today actually, that the PS or the back catalogue will have trophies for a lot of those things. So
yeah, it doesn't particularly matter to me, but the fact that they're doing that is actually something. About Xbox, the whole model of Game Pass being a place to play is kind of based upon good games and, to a degree, good first-party games coming out on a regular basis. And I think, Jay, you mentioned it earlier, are Microsoft able to kind of manage these studios? Because so far the outlook for this year doesn't look good for them. I'm sure there's other things to play on the service, but it's like they're where the big titles. I mean, that's the thing. It's a tough one, isn't it?
They're potentially going to have a show and have no release dates for the
Yeah,
rest
I
of the
know
year.
that's an ugly look. But I mean, I'm not sure they're going to have no releases. But the thing is, the big titles, the things that people are thinking define Xbox now, it's kind of done a runner until next year.
Yeah, I mean the thing that they have is that as they're shedding their new skin, they need new IPs and new identity. They can't afford to have the Cyberpunk flop. So, and I'm okay with that, to be honest. I mean, I'll let my Xbox sit there with not switching it on for another year.
Yeah,
I still think
that's the problem with it. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. It does feel they've got to do something about. I mean, because it's not the first time that people have kind of discussed whether Xbox are really good at managing their first-party studios. I mean, this is not. I think this is the second or third time that this has come
Well, I
up.
think Starfield already had those problems before this anyway, so...
Yeah, yeah, potentially. That's for sure.
COVID excuses as well. I mean, look at Halo.
Yeah, but that's not going great guns, is it?
No, that's what I'm saying. It is. There's no COVID excuse for that. It's Phil Spencer and his team would have been playing the regular demos of the working product versus seeing PowerPoints of this is how we're doing and massage the progress, and it still flopped.
Yeah. So basically, we have one company who has this high-value game service where you get day-on-date releases for AAA games, but has no AAA games. Then you've got another company who doesn't want to do day-and-date releases, who have an abundance of AAA games coming out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is. So you know what that
ironic,
says,
isn't it?
guys? Consolidation.
Yeah, it's Nintendo are never going to go to a subscription model, are they? And if they can still be a competitor but not have the model, that gives Sony a window to kind of still play in the middle.
I think that's
Which is what they're
Sony
doing.
are going to end up doing, in my kind of humble opinion.
Yeah.
You're right about Nintendo. We kind of talked about them. They're not really that interested.
I mean,
lots of
they're
things.
playing with other things, and that's a completely separate
No.
topic, but,
Yeah, yeah, and the reality is, it's like whether they'll be forced to or not. It just depends if people still want their content, and very much so, people still want their content.
They've got this far without having a robust online service. So, like a competitor to Game Pass, get it.
No, it's not that, is it? Is it good? I don't know enough about it, but it doesn't look good.
What I'm trying to say is it's definitely not good. It's very minimal. But their games aren't really designed to leverage it. It's all more single player games, their IP, right? So and there's enough demand for that, and it's still geared towards the younger gamers, and that's not going to go away. And they have no competition in that
exactly.
space
They
as
have
well.
no real competition in the portable handheld space. They've got their niche, and whether they want to extend beyond that arena is largely down to their own ambition. I think they're probably doing extremely well in terms of profit. I mean, it can't be that expensive to manufacture a Switch now. It was legacy technology when it came out. But anyway, look, I think we've talked enough about, Xbox versus PlayStation and the new services. I think it's really, now time to, end this kind of part of the podcast and move on. Okay, guys, so it's come to that time in the podcast where we've got to basically, say our goodbyes, and I'm going to ask that regular question. What games and tech-related things are you doing? Al, I'm going to start with you.
definitely a lot of work.
Does that count?
You're on the wrong podcast.
Still playing... So I think I would say that I've played little to no Genshin. So I've stopped pretty much because there's a lot of delays and stuff going on in it. So I've pretty much ceased playing that. Reduced my PGR play, but I've played a lot more Arknights. Arknights has been great fun. Tech-wise, not a huge amount. I think I might have already mentioned last time installing an SSD and stuff, but I haven't really been doing too much. Still haven't applied the thermal pads to my graphics card and stuff. But yeah, not a huge amount on my side. I think that's mostly it.
How about you, Jay? What have you been up to?
I've been quite busy actually. So I bought a new SSD for my PS5, the Western Digital Black. Got 1 terabyte in there in my PS5, which I had fun installing. And then I've gone deep into the world of fighting games and watched so many YouTube videos and understood who are the main YouTubers in the space and watched the videos on Evo, because I've kind of ignored all of that before. And I bought a fight stick, a Canberra Obsidian, which is a huge brick of a fighting stick, but it's so nice to play on. And I've fallen in love with fighting games. I bought King of Fighters 15, which I'm absolutely loving. And I've been looking into the SNK history, because all of those characters have a lot of history. And we've been researched. There's a SNK coffee table book that's being released as well, which I which got all the artwork, which I think I'm probably going to buy. I bought Guilty Gear Strive, which I've been playing, and I bought Mortal Kombat 11. There's a game on the horizon by Arc Systems called DNF Duel, which is their latest game using an existing franchise. So they had Dragon Ball Z before. Dungeon Fighter Online is a popular Korean game, so it's got the characters from that. So I'm all about fighting games. I'm having to having to learn again how to use a fight stick and just. Yeah, so I'm all in on fighting games at the moment, and I've been playing Destiny on a Sunday, but that's just been raiding the single player stuff. I've not really kind of been involved in, but that's me.
That fight stick looked quite solid and high end, was it?
Oh yeah, it's really nice. There's a more premium one by Victrix. All of the good fight sticks, there's no stock. There's literally zero stock, and I found this in a kind of a boutique UK arcade store with quite a it's a rough website, pretty much, right?
Interesting.
But they sell mostly components.
Yeah.
But they had stock of this, so I picked this up. It's really nice to use. It's got the Samba components, Samba fight stick, and Samba buttons. I don't know if you know about the arcade buttons, but it's meant to be the best. So yeah, I'm tapping away now next to me.
Yeah. I kind of had a fight stick for a while. Yeah, cool. I guess it's my goal, right? So what have I been doing? I started playing Bloodborne for whatever reason. So
oh really? Wow.
I'm trying to get through my back catalogue, and I kind of started trying to get through, Last of Us 2 again. So just dabbling on and off because I've been kind of like quite busy, recently. And by the way, I mean, Last of Us 2, I can't help but be impressed by that game. Another one of these Sony first-party games that you think, wow, you guys know what you're doing in terms of squeezing as much you can out of this machine. And what else I've been doing? Tech-wise, had to try and fix the cooler on my PC. Ended up, there's nothing wrong with the cooler, by the way. It's just that I've got an OLED display on it, and that seems to have gone kaput. But annoyingly, it looks like I'm going to have to change the thing. So I'm going through the motions of kind of going back to Curry's PC world to kind of do all of that nonsense. So it's a bit annoying. Basically, kind of configured a few things, just kind of changed up the BIOS. And other than that, I've just been kind of like trying to learning tech. But that's more of a job thing. So not much more than that, really. I mean, I think in the next couple of months, or I'm probably going to start playing more games. I mean, that's the idea. And just trying to do a bit more with the podcast, and basically started spinning up a blog that I'm going to use, for the podcast and stuff like that. Just dabbling in a bit of that kind of like search engine optimization and whatnot. So and prepping really kind of big kind of slide decks for this podcast. Let's not forget that. So
much appreciated.
I quite enjoy doing it. It's very almost. I won't even call it geeky, but it's very kind of
therapeutic.
Yeah, weirdly so. It's like I've basically missed producing slide decks for some reason. But yeah, so I mean, I think I'll continue that and just kind of post those things, just use them properly. That's me, really, guys. We're done for another podcast, and as you know, we kind of renamed the thing. So let's see how that goes, and I think it's really just time for our goodbyes. Al, we'll start with you.
Yeah, goodbye from me, Al.
And it's goodbye from me, Jay.
And it's goodbye from me, Joel. And whatever you're doing, like, subscribe, and comment, and have a stellar day.